like to call to order the meeting of September 19th, 2012, Milton School Committee. And as our custom, I would invite you to rise and salute the flag with us. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a fairly aggressive agenda this evening, and there are a few changes I'd like to make to it. First, under the superintendent's report, we're going to have a brief presentation from Jerry Vitti, representing the Milton Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So that'll be first under the superintendent's report. Also under the superintendent's report, after the Milton High School Time Subcommittee presentation, we will have a brief MCAS update, as some of those results were disembargoed, or whatever the word is today. So they're available. We'll have a brief report on that as well. One change in the Time Subcommittee, Brian Board couldn't be here, and I understand Diane Crowley is going to take his place, or at least so Mary says. Under the Finance Subcommittee, we're going to drop the FY14 budget calendar item. Under my report, under the elementary programming assignment, there's another piece of data here, a national immersion data piece that has been supplied to you. We're not going to go over it too much, but it is there. And also at the end of my report, Mr. Walker is going to make a brief report on the Town Government Study Committee that he sits on.
No.
No?
No.
You're not?
No, I'm not.
You sent me an email saying you were.
No, I want Rick Neely to do that.
Oh, okay.
He did it for the selectmen, he should do it for us.
Okay. Then we won't add that. And then the last piece is under, when we go into executive session at the end, it won't be for approval of minutes. We will do administrative contracts, and we do need to discuss what falls under the language of a competitively sensitive information, the disclosure of which will adversely affect our ability to conduct business in relation to electric power and energy. So it's under one of the open meeting law exceptions that we'll deal with that in closed session later on. Anything else for our agenda? Whatever. Very good, then we'll declare it approved. And we will start with citizen speaking. Do we have a list, Mark? Two lists. You said the yellow one was the first. All right. Okay, so first is Lori Billowitz.
Thank you. I really just wanted to take a few moments to give everyone an update on Celebrate Milton. Our 2012 event is taking place on Sunday, October 7th, hopefully right here at the high school outside, because it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. If the weather doesn't cooperate with us, we'll be inside at the Collycott Cunningham schools. And so thank you to the public schools for making those venues available to us. Celebrate Milton has a long history of collaboration with the public schools, and like every year we have FAME doing the food tent for us. It's one of their biggest fundraisers, so we encourage people to visit that. We have great high school volunteers who come and help us set up tables and break down tables and assist us throughout the day. We have the high school groups who often come as exhibitors and have their own tables and talk to the community about the things that they're doing at the school. And then as entertainment, we always have kids from Pierce, kids from the high school in the different arts programs who come and entertain our community, and it's terrific. In addition to that, this year, we always give Community Builder Awards, and Community Builder Awards are intended to highlight individuals or groups in the community who are doing really good things to further the mission of Celebrate Milton, which is really to celebrate the diversity within this town and to help different groups come together, understand each other better. And we had a terrific group of nominees this year. And very happy to share with you who our Community Builder Awards are going to. The first person is Sherry Holder-Watts. Sherry has served on the board of Celebrate Milton for quite a while. She helps arrange our entertainment, really leads that piece of it, and always ensures that she has a diverse lineup of entertainment. We have Irish step dancers, we've had Japanese drummers in the past, a wide variety, and she does a great job with that. The other nominees and awardees have connections to the Milton Public Schools, and I'm very proud to say that. One is Christine Mines, who is involved in the High School Diversity Committee. Another is Marcia Uretsky, the principal of Tucker, which as a Tucker parent, I am incredibly proud of that one. And also with a connection to Tucker, what you may or may not know, Frank Schroth from My Town Matters. And the connection to Tucker is the wonderful video that he produced about the Tucker School. And in addition to presenting a Community Builder Award to Frank this year, we are also, with thanks, some tactical help from Mary, making it possible to show the video at the Celebrate Milton event. It will be running within the school, and as folks come in, CHIPS will be inside the school doing their child identification program, so people, particularly with young children, will be coming into the school, and they'll have an opportunity to see Frank's video. And it's had a few showings, but I think only a limited number of people have had the opportunity to see it. So we're really excited that at this event in particular, that the rest of the town will have that opportunity. So thank you for your time. I'm going to leave some flyers on the table. Feel free to grab one on your way out.
All right. We know Laurie is a Milton resident. Part of Citizen Speak is we ask you to say people to give their address as well, and it's my fault for not reminding folks of that. Next would be Jessica, is it Lane or Lene? Lane, okay.
And Christine Halley.
And Christine Halley.
So Christine Halley, 30 Center Lane. And Jessica Lane, 37 Randolph Ave. Together, we have 19 years of experience with the co-taught classroom, so we wanted to come and talk about that to correct some opinions and let people know how great we think it is.
I myself have 5 children. 4 have all participated in co-taught classrooms, 1 on an IEP in a co-taught classroom, 3 as role models. And I can't speak enough about it. I also understand the importance of foreign language. I studied one for years and years myself. My older children at Pierce studying Latin. I couldn't be happier. There's also things that I couldn't teach my children that they can only benefit from being in a co-taught classroom on both sides. And, you know, after reading the article in the Boston Globe last week, some of the comments were maybe misquotes, I hope, but, you know, to say, you know, that it's a de facto honors program or that people that have high aspirations for their children choose French, I kind of have a problem with. I have high aspirations for all my children, each one of them, whether it be higher education or a job or whatever it is. I do also. And my children are flourishing in all grades. So, you know, hopefully they were misquotes, but, you know, I know that sentiment, you know, is common. So I just wanted to debunk some of those things, having had so many years' experience on both sides.
I think now that there are so many issues coming out with the cap, and we both support Mary's goal of capping the French immersion program, maybe that the town can take the opportunity to educate parents more clearly about all of the different programs, particularly any that all of the children get to benefit from, and all children can benefit from the co-taught classroom. It's amazing. There are so many studies now about emotional intelligence and how those skills are the skills that drive success and happiness later in life, and we feel strongly that those are the skills that are learned in a class like the co-taught classroom. And academics are unbelievable. The differentiated learning is so clearly there. My oldest was in a co-taught classroom with a maximum of 18 children and 4 teachers for 4 years in a row. That is unbelievable. And I think people need to understand that that's available, and it's an honor to be able to be in these classrooms. It's not a burden. And our children have done extremely well in them, and we hope that other people can think about it a little more clearly and understand the value of all of the programs in Milton Public Schools. Anything else?
That's it.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carol Seidman.
Sorry, I'm a little surprised that I'm next, that's all. I thought there'd be like a million other people before. Anyway, hello, my name is Carol Seidman, and I live at 64 Pagoda Circle. I just wanted to make a few comments, and I want to support some of the comments that were just said by the 2 previous speakers, so I won't, go on and on, but I think each program needs to be respected, and also the delineation between the fact that there are not a lot of disabled kids or kids who are labeled disabled by having an IEP or a 504 in the French program, but I can tell you that there are many kids in the French program, my son included, who could use an IEP and who I've asked for one on several occasions. So, that is still in the works, but there seems to be sometimes a perception that disability and being bright are mutually exclusive, and that concerns me a lot. So I have a son in the French program and a son in the co-taught, so it's not that I don't know that there's different options in the school, but I'd like to see less black lines between the 3 programs, because in reality it becomes 3 programs. It's a 3-tiered program. You're either in the co-taught, the English, or the French. And the perception is, from my sense around town and my talking to other parents, that it's clear what people think of each one. And I think the town should be concerned that there aren't more kids on IEPs or 504s, or kids of color, or kids who come from poor families not in the French program. I think that concern should be addressed by the school. Why are those numbers the way they are? Because there's some automatic problem with it if we look at the numbers. Thank you. Also, by the way, I have a site for you, Mr. Phelan, about Wi-Fis in schools. But because there's no Wi-Fi, I can't send it to you.
Is there anyone else for citizen speak this evening? Then we will move on. We have a couple sets of minutes, and so first is the minutes of August 28th, which was a finance subcommittee meeting that was posted as a full school committee meeting in order to handle the health policy that needed to be voted by the 1st of September. And so you have those minutes. Yes. This was
Or did it last
This was
all day?
AM. It says AM at the top, it says PM underneath it, but it is,
So it was both AM?
no, it's both, they just, yeah, it didn't start at 7 AM, it started 12 hours later, no. That's a typo, it should be AM. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Move approval.
Mr. Walker moves,
Second.
second by Ms. Padera.
I wasn't there.
Oh, neither Ms. Bagley-Jones or I were there, so any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? 2 and 2 abstentions. All right, now we'll move on to minutes of our regular meetings, July 25th. Entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved?
Moved by Ms. Bagley-Jones, Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Padera. Any comments, corrections, edits, otherwise? Seeing none, then, all those in favor of the minutes of July 25th?
Yes.
Mr. Walker, are you
I'm going to
voting?
abstain.
You're going to abstain? No. So it's 301 with one abstention, Mr. Walker. And next, the minutes of August 8th. Again, I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Walker,
Second?
second by Ms. Bagley Jones. Any comments, corrections, otherwise, on the minutes of the 8th?
Can I ask a
Sure.
question about the format, or should I ask later? When we, on 3, when we have the dialogue, on page 2,
Yes, I see.
is that, because that makes it so much more specific.
Well, the
I don't
minutes
know.
are intended, you know, the purpose of minutes is that someone reading it would understand what our deliberation was and what the crux of the discussion was. It does not necessarily need to mention names. If it's, we could go either way, we could,
We can talk about later, I just,
okay.
that, I don't, I'm just a little concerned.
We'll look at format, but is there anything substantive in them that's incorrect or needs adjustment?
Mm-mm.
All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. And so now we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Ms. Gormley.
Thank you, Chairman Pavlicek. First, I'd like to invite to join the school committee at the table Jerry Vitti, representing the Milton Public School Special Education PAC.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Appreciate you allowing me this opportunity to speak tonight. I am Gerard Vitti. I live at 15 Longwood Road in Milton. I am the chair of the Milton Parent Advisory Council Special Education Advocacy Group in town. We have 3 children in Anthony, who's 12, Francesca, who's 10, and Celia, who's 6. We've participated, in case you didn't had any doubts that we were Italian. Our family has participated in French, in English. My son, as Jessica and Christine so articulately stated, was a role model in the co-taught classroom. It's just a wonderful experience. I can't be I can't be more clear on how wonderful it was for him to be in that class. And my daughter Francesca is in the co-taught classroom in 5th grade at Glover. So, I just, by way of background, this is kind of the I feel your pain moment. I own a small business. I have about 90 employees. I'm in the healthcare field, so I have an appreciation for what it's like to run a complex organization in a very fast-moving and dynamic environment, and I just want to thank you for your service and your ability to do this on behalf of all children of Milton. So, thank you. Now into the standard part of my presentation. I want to start by saying the Milton Parent Advisory Council, or the PAC, is an organization mandated by Massachusetts state law whose responsibility, as dictated by Chapter 71B, Section 3, is to advise the school committee on matters that pertain to the education and safety of students with disabilities, and to meet regularly with the school officials to participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of the school committee's special education programs. So we have a kind of a legal place at the table. The board of directors, many of whom are here tonight, and our supporters who have helped with this testimony, have developed in accordance with our mission the following statement, and really regarding the rights of all children in the school system. So, According to federal law, all children, and I want to underscore all children, are entitled to a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, regardless of their differences or course of studies. So when we look at this issue before us, I see this, and we see this as really as a civil rights issue, that it's a right of every disabled child to get his or her education in the least restrictive setting, and we think that there are shortfalls with the way it's being done now. An example, I think the most probably well-known example is at Glover. There needed to be a French cap on new students moving into the district in order to find the right number of role models for the co-taught classroom. In doing this, it's certainly not in accordance with what has been done in the past and what is stated, I know I believe it's on the website, but it's at least in the special education guide. So going forward, we certainly support and think the only way to go forward is essentially for this co-taught example, is that we needed appropriate role models. We needed them selected from a deep pool of children. And in doing so, we protect the rights of kids with special needs. So the PAC is coming out strongly in favor of a cap on the French program in the year, in 2013, 2014. In doing so, we reject the economic argument that around home prices that have been bandied about. I think the rights of one group cannot be held hostage to economic issues or perceived economic issues. We reject the idea of the elimination of the French and the English and having a French-only solution. We think that's exclusionary and segregationist. It's a strong word, but that's what we feel. It's not, I don't think it's who we are as a people, nor who we are as a town. I'd also like to stress that there's urgency for the school committee to act. We've had an ad hoc solution. It worked to an extent this year, but we really need a fundamental way of addressing this. And to that, I would say that rights delayed are rights denied. So I'm happy to report the town has a newly energized PAC. We've got a lot of new board members and a lot of enthusiasm, especially around this issue. We're organizing around this issue. We're doubling down around our position on the cap, and we're here to advocate in the future for all kids in the French, in the English, and kids who are receiving special education services. So thank you for your time and for all your hard work on behalf of all kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is precisely the kind of thing that the legislature had in mind when they created the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, is to come forward and give this sorts of information to the school committee. Which is why, at the last minute when we heard they were coming, we added them to the agenda, because it really merits more than just a few sentences at citizen speak. They're a vital part of this school community, and so we wanted to make sure they got a spot on the agenda. Ms. Gormley, if you continue.
Thank you, Chairman Pavlicek. Next, we'd like to invite to the table the Milton High School Times Subcommittee. And Chairman Pavlicek made the addition of Diane Crowley. I'd also like to invite to the table Kathy Quealy is here with the high school team.
Did you jump ahead of what?
Oh, I did. I'm going to ask to join us at the table now, the Milton High School Athletic Hall of Fame, represented by Mike Goodless, the chairman of the Board of Directors, Margaret Gibbons, a board member, and Diane Crowley, a board member.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to say that the Milton High School Athletic Hall of Fame would not exist without the support of Ms. Gormley and Mr. Phelan. We've been in existence since 2007, and they've constantly supported us, and we appreciate that. Currently, we have approximately 85 individuals and 10 teams in the Hall of Fame. We pick people in 4 categories: student athletes, coaches, teams, and friends and contributors. I think in your handout, everyone has a sheet,
They're green folders.
green folders. So our induction ceremony this year is occurring on October 20th. At 5:30, we will have an unveiling in the Copeland Fieldhouse, where the inductees will have their wall-mounted plaques unveiled. And that will be followed by a dinner at a banquet at Lantana, and we expect approximately 300 people. There's a list of the board of directors, all volunteers. We meet 7 or 8 times a year, and there's a fair amount of work involved in this. On the other side of the sheet, there is a list of this year's inductees. And I would like to recognize the parent of one of our inductees, our math teacher at Milton High School, Vern Nelson, whose son, Alimu, is an inductee this year, and I'm proud to say that Alimu played for me when I was the basketball coach here. Ms. Crowley would like to say a few words.
On October 20th, we invite the community to come and join us on this great night. I never played a sport in my life, despite the fine physical education that I received from the Milton Public Schools in my youth. But I have to tell you, it's a night that I enjoy. It's a night about community. It's a night about recognition. So many old friends come together and support what is great about Milton High School, but especially the legacy that is athletics. So we hope that friends and athletes and families will come out. Tickets are available. We have information posted on the Edline site as well as on cable. And the evening begins at Lantana after the ceremony here. We invite you to come and join us for a cocktail hour, a sit-down dinner, $60 for a great night to see people you haven't seen in years, and you're going to be so happy to see them. It's a wonderful night. We expect about 300 people for dinner, and we hope that you will come and join us. We need your reservation soon, though, because these tickets are selling out, and we want to be able to sit friends with each other. So when you do send us your reservation, we hope that you'll let us know your honoree, who you're there to support, what team you're with, and we want to make sure that everybody comes out and has a great evening. Mrs. Gibbons will speak.
Thanks. I would be remiss, not just Mary and John, who helped in the formation of this, but to sit here and not say the Herculean role that Mr. Goodless has played to make this a reality. That was just a dream for many years, but a reality for this community that will go forward and onward when we're all not participating as well. But I always remember people telling me to end something with a story, because you're going to remember the story. And I just have a story about one of our sponsors. From the beginning, Lopez the florist has been there for us without a blink, without a word, no, not a hesitation. What do you need, Margaret, for those flowers? What can I give you? And I called just the other day, and the son now is working with Dad. And actually, Mike was just walking out of my room, and I said, I'm on the phone with Lopez, and I didn't tell them, but I upped the flowers by 50, and so we'd have even more red and white carnations to reflect the red and white colors of our community here at the high school in athletics. And again, without a blink. And this time, young Dawn said to me, "Do you need me to deliver them, Mrs. Gibbons?" I said, "No, I think I can come pick them up since they're for free." But again, they've been a terrific supporter of us and Mike and Diane. The whole committee is just outstanding, and we look forward to seeing you on the 20th.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I might, Mr. Goodless or one of the members, would you quickly, for the viewing audience, read the names of this year's inductees?
James Flaherty, 1955, Paul McDonald, 1950, John Welpley, 1950, Kevin Blake, 1975, Jackie Donahue, 1973, Jim Frederickson, Joe Sidoti, 1964, Tara Bly, 2000, Jenna Bartolotti, 2007, Adam Donovan, 2007, Dennis Duggan, Dan Egan, Michael Ferris, 1999, Sean Goodwin, 1990, Alicia Moran, 2001, Ellen McCarthy Needham, 85, Alimu Nelson, 81, 55, indoor track team, 57, outdoor track, 72, indoor track, and we finally got women's sports by 1996, so we have a women's cross-country team.
Excellent.
And I would just like to add one thing. I teach economics at the high school. I love it. The kids are great. I really enjoy coming to Milton High School every day. But I have to say that October 20th, the date of the banquet, is my favorite night of the year, because what happens, you bring together 300 people that all have in common a love for Milton High School and a love for athletics. So it really is a special night. Thank you.
Well done, thank you. And thank you to all, congratulations to all of this year's inductees. Next, I'd like to invite to join the school committee at the table, the Milton High School Times Subcommittee. And Chairman Pavlicek, we asked to add Diane Crowley in that Brian Board is at a soccer game tonight. Also joining us from Milton High School, Kathy Quealy and Vern Nelson. So with us tonight, Principal James Jett, Vice Principals Yolanda Beach and Michelle Cruiser, Tom Shaw, excellent teacher Tom Shaw, and Barbara Wright was not able to join us tonight. I wanted to recognize those individuals that served in the committee and came tonight. For the viewing audience and the school committee, one more time, if you'd have the members identify themselves.
Diane Crowley. Kathy Quayle. Michelle Cruiser.
James Jett.
Yolanda Beach.
Tom Shaw.
Thank you.
So, first of all, good evening, and thank you for allowing us to come and present to the committee. Although we have a rather large group here, there's many more members that served on this committee last year under the leadership of Joe Arangio, and I do have to extend it a few years back to Dr. John Drata. Tonight, we're going to do a proposal on what we call a time committee, a study that the subcommittee follow-up to NEAS, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. It's a proposal to provide...
They don't want to see you, they want to see the screen.
Oh, okay. It's a proposal to provide collaborative time for our teachers to work on, but I do want to preface that by saying the ultimate goal is to enhance and increase student achievement. The collaborative time for those in the audience and those the viewing audience is to give our teachers, our faculty and staff an opportunity to work together, share best practices, review instructional, review curriculum, analyze data, share and enhance instructional practices, and increase student achievement. And as we think about that, we talk about collaborative time. What are the benefits of that? We have many teachers here this evening. Oh.
Great.
Thank you. Can someone? Thank you. We have several teachers here that will give a few examples on why they feel collaborative time is very important for them, and then we get into the gist of our presentation, and I'll start with Diane Crowley.
When we talk about the increase in student achievement...
You might, excuse me, Diane,
Aim the mic.
you want to take the portable mic in your hand? That might be easier for you? Sure.
When we talk about the increase in student achievement and the analysis of student work, one of the things that has been missing for us, particularly in the English department, is we align curriculum and we talk about MCAS and we talk about pre-AP opportunities, is the chance for teachers to get together, plan lessons that expect students to think critically, reflect rigor. And an example of something that in the English department we do and want to continue doing and do more is, for instance, the district has a summer reading program. We want to be able to sit together and talk about the books that the kids are reading, the choices that they have, the choices that they make, because at the high school level they can select among among a number of titles, and look at the responses we're getting, the quality of written work, the quality of the kids' thinking, their engagement with the text. We need to do that in September or October. It doesn't benefit us to talk quickly about summer reading in May when it took place the previous July and August. And that's an example of the kind of beneficial work that will ultimately be a boon for the students in our class, because they will have teachers who know what they're reading, who have been thoughtful in selecting titles, and have been thoughtful in planning assessments collaboratively with each other across grades and levels.
The idea of collaborative time, you know, it's a simple idea, and it makes sense, you know, when you have people working together, they're more likely to get better results than if you're doing it by yourself in your own cubicle, you know. But it's been, you know, in the education world and with professional development for teachers, it's kind of been historically like the pink elephant or the unicorn. It's something that we dream about, but it's not a reality. And it's nice that, you know, with NEASC at least, it comes along and they're saying, no, this is, you know, we obviously need this, and you know, and that's one of the reasons we're sitting here today. And when you go to a professional development, all the teachers say the same thing. Every single one, we at least all agree on one thing, and that's when we're together, working on curriculum and working on what happens in our classroom, that's when we get our best work done. That's like our #1 request for professional development. And as an educator, it's exciting to have the opportunity to come here and request that and hopefully see it happen. The reality is, for us right now, collaborative time is more like a random occurrence that happens in the hallway or at lunchtime. And it's amazing, you know, if I have 30 minutes with one of my peers in the science department, which happens, you know, 5 times during the year, I probably get the best ideas that happen in the classroom the whole year. But it's often a random occurrence, and it limits to just maybe 5 or 6 lessons over the course of the year. And if we can have it, you know, in our schedule, imagine what we could do if we had collaborative time, you know, systematic, so that we can work on each unit as a team. And what's kind of funny to me is, as an educator, teamwork is so important with what we teach the kids in the classroom, but yet we don't have it institutionalized yet, you know, in our professional development in a way that allows us to work on the curriculum and what we do in the classroom every day, you know, in a direct manner. And so, for me anyway, this is extremely exciting. It's like that pink elephant might actually exist. And hopefully we can make this happen.
In thinking of collaborative time, in terms of developing interdisciplinary units and making connections across the curriculum, I think that's one of the concepts and ideas that is extremely powerful, especially for perhaps those that might be a reluctant learner. If we can show, in terms of developing a unit, the connection with math, English, history, and science, and if those teachers can come together and show how they all fit together, it could be very real. And I think that's one of the things that the students look for today, or something that is real and something that's relevant. So I think that this one has a lot going for it and a lot of potential. And it can only be done if we can have some collaborative time in which to do it together. In terms of getting together and talking across the disciplines, seeing how they fit, seeing how they can work with each other and make it more relevant for the students, I think there's a lot to learn right there. In terms of collaboration on the creation, analysis, and revision of formative and summative assessments, we do some of this already, I think here and there, in terms of the formative assessments, do that almost on a daily basis with a warm-up or maybe exit slip or something like that. But the strength of being able to do that well is to develop some sort of consistency and some sort of uniformity across the discipline. And again, what you want to develop, I think, are best practices within your department or across the school in terms of doing that. And again, I'll meet with some of my colleagues that we teach the same subject, maybe between classes or before school or after school for 5-10 minutes, but we don't really have the time to do it that well. And we're getting into the practice right now of we're doing some work on the summative assessments at the midterm exams and the final exams, and we are spending time on that, and we can always enhance that further. So one of the things I think the way you develop best practices is that you want to have consistency in approach and consistency in deployment, which will allow you to evaluate and then make adjustments as is needed.
I was just going to speak a little bit about something very concrete that we can see there, which is the grading practices. To give you an example of how we need to get together and speak about grading practices, the beginning of the year, the language department adopted a new grading policy due to the fact that we have some new staff members who came in with some great ideas from other places, and we were able to talk about a new grading policy. And we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to come back together in a little while to talk about how it's been working, our thoughts, our concerns, and we would really need some time to be able to do that because we have a departmental consistency with our grading, and it would be great to be able to talk about how it's going. And secondly, something I've said to the school committee before is we have the great opportunities to go to workshops. I've been to AP workshops. We have primary, we have the Scholars program, and people go out and they get educated and very excited about their program. We come back and there's just not a lot of time, if any time, to be able to share. I would love to be able to sit with the department and talk about the program that we do it informally, of course, but not formally. It would be great to be able to have that opportunity. And just lastly, just a little example of our community building. I've been part of the opening of school for the last 22 or so years. This year, we were able to all get together on that Tuesday before school started, and it set the tone for the year because I, for one, was in the gym with people that I hadn't seen before, new members of the school community, and when we got back into the auditorium, the level of motivation and everybody had smiles on. It was a great feeling and a great way to start the school year because we were all together and had an opportunity to work together, meet, and talk. So we'd love to have more of that time.
I just want to, add kind of to what Kathy ended on there. I love coaching. I love coaching because it's so fun and exciting to get a group of kids together to work hard toward a common goal and achieve great success. And they achieve it because they're working together. And there's that team community and environment. And this is what collaborative time will bring to us here in the building, is a greater sense that we're a team working together toward a common goal, because we get that time to develop that culture within the profession. And it's not something that exists on the level that it should. And this can bring that culture into our building, which would be awesome.
So when you're talking about the collaboration, as you can see, it instills in people a level of enthusiasm. I had no idea what Tom was going to say, and he actually stole my sports analogy when I was going to talk about teacher retention and job satisfaction. But I think that's very important because oftentimes you hear certain people saying, I wish I could speak to the science teacher down the hall if you're a math teacher. By having that collaborative time, by having an opportunity to enhance each other and to challenge each other to think critically about their lessons and what they're doing is very important. It gives a sense of professionalism. It values the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and it really pushes the level of instruction, which ultimately increases the student achievement. So we gave you a few examples of what the benefits are of the collaborative time, and you're probably saying to us, well, why are you making that announcement this evening? And we're going to talk a little bit about that because we talked a little bit about NEASC, and we'll give you a definition of NEASC, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But I think it's important for us to set the tone as to what the collaborative time was and why we feel as though we would benefit from having that at Milton High School.
So I think anybody within a 10-mile radius of Milton High knew what NEASC was and had the word imprinted in their brain last November. We started planning for NEASC in 2009. That spring we met before we got out for the school year in June, and we started the process because the process was incredibly it was invigorating, and it was a lot of hard work, but it was well worth it. And the best analogy I could give, I would think, for NEASC, for people who weren't quite sure what the accreditation team did for us, we think of it as like a report card. And it's always nice to get a report card and to, in the end, to get the stamp of approval. After we reported what our self-analysis, we look at their standards and do some data research, and we all get together, and there was teams that met, and we reported, self-reported, and then the team comes in, the accreditation team came in November, comes in and scrutinizes, comes to every classroom, looks at all the data, and either says, yes, you're doing what you say you did, or we find some faults. And we were very, not surprisingly, very pleased that we met the accreditation standards, and we were accredited last year. It was extremely hard work, like I said, but the process was very beneficial to us, and our professional development time that we met together as groups was very well spent, and it was done after school on our own time. So, and the NEASC slide is up there, so you can see.
And with NEASC, you know, being a member of this organization, with the standards that they gave to us for us to conduct the self-study, it's all research-based. It's all about best practices. And ultimately, it's about student achievement. What NEASC gave us were a number of recommendations that they wanted us to work on. And we know there were a number of commendations. And we've already begun the work on the recommendations. What we did as a time collaborative committee is we took a look at all of the recommendations from NEASC, and we looked specifically at the ones that required time for the staff to come together to work on a number of different items. And so the time-related recommendations are understanding the 21st century learning expectations, developing and implementing a school-wide curriculum format. They were very pleased that we did have curriculum for all of our courses. And so now we need to incorporate make sure that all of the 21st century learning expectations are a part of that. So we do have to adjust our format. It's also important that they said to us that we need a uniformly high rigor with the curriculum. So they noticed that, yes, they did notice that there was some rigor, but they said that it needs to be across the board, whether it's a college prep class, whether it's honors, whether it's advanced placement, that we need to make sure the bar is high for all classes across every grade in every course. So that's something that we need to work on. So as we look at these specific time-related recommendations, the reason why we want the collaborative time is so that we can address these issues, so that staff can come together to work on all of these. And there's a lot of work involved. Staff also need that time to look at student work. You know, it's one thing to give an assignment, a project, a test, a quiz, but then it's another to afterwards come together with colleagues who teach the same course or a similar course to say, okay, what does this tell me? You know, I need to be informed by the results. You know, did all my students do really well? What is that saying to me? How did I teach what I taught? What strategies did I use to help them to understand the content? But the staff need that time to come together in order to analyze that, and we don't have that. Also, you know, you heard us refer to the formative and summative assessments. So there needs that time for us to collaborate. And when we keep saying collaborate, NEASC has said that it's important, and we all agree. We said so in our self-study, that we need this consistent, and you keep hearing the word consistent tonight, this regular ongoing time. So it can't just be a splash, like once a year, twice a year, but it has to be this ongoing work on the formative, summative assessments, on the curriculum, on analyzing the student data.
And if I could just make a footnote, in some of your packets, and I do apologize, we added a few slides to kind of bring a little more clarity to the presentation. But to kind of give you the timeline, just for those who didn't know, and I think Ms. Quayle kind of alluded to it, a couple of years ago they did the 2-year self-study. Then we had the site visit, the high school had the site visit back in November, I believe it was 6th through the 9th. Then after they left, there was a follow-up subcommittee. They did some work, and they kind of, Dr. Arangio, who did a great job along with members up here and some that are not represented here, putting together a follow-up committee to kind of get ahead of the ball a little bit and kind of second guess what, or guess what NIAS would tell them. Then in May 16th, we received a letter with the given Milton High School the continued accreditation. And from there, it was some recommendations. And so when we talk about the timeline and the time frame of why we're making this presentation, I just want to make it clear that we didn't have much time before the end of the year, particularly at the high school level. You had graduation, you had so many things going on at the end of the year. So this subcommittee or this follow-up committee did a lot of work that was serving as a springboard for the beginning part of this year to kind of build upon. So when we talk about why we're coming to this proposal this evening, we're talking about the deadline in which we have to give to NIAS a special progress report highlighting specific steps and actions that we take to show evidence that we're moving forward with some of the recommendations. So I definitely wanted to share that with you, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those recommendations.
One of the slides that we added was with respect to the special progress report that's due on February 1st, 2013. And there were 5 key points that NIASC said that we needed to address and respond to in this report that's due February 1st. One of them is one that we've already accomplished, and that is that they said that we need to have a course that is heterogeneous, in which it's not leveled, it's an unleveled course that all students in a particular grade are taking. And so we made the decision, and we've implemented it beginning this year, that for the 9th grade Modern World Cultures, one of our history classes, all 9th graders are taking it. Again, it is unleveled, and that was one of the things that we have accomplished. So we're pleased to say that we have done that. For the next 3 items that they would like for us to respond to in the special progress report, we've already begun the work on them. And so for this next slide regarding points 2, 3, and 4, this was another slide that we added. We know that you all received the letter, a copy of the May 14th letter, and so we just took this from that letter so that you would see the 5 items that we have to respond to. And so for the second item, again, it refers to the curriculum in terms of reviewing it and evaluating it, updating it, and that is with respect to the 21st century learning expectations. Also, with the third point we have to respond to, it is with respect to the department and the content areas assuming responsibility for certain expectations. And so that's something that we've begun work on as well. The committee, as a matter of fact, they've already begun their meetings, the Learning Expectations Committee, so that we can make sure that everything is finalized as we move forward. The fourth point we've already begun to work on as well, and that is that ensuring that prior to each study, each unit that's worked on in a class, that teachers are communicating to the students those 21st century learning expectations that apply to the lessons. And so again, we're in the early stages of this work, moving in that direction. So we're pleased to say that we've begun on those. Now, for the final point, point number 5, this is the focus of the Collaborative Time Committee. So with point 5, this is something that we have not done yet, and that is that they said that we must provide for our teachers this increased, very formal, again, we keep hearing words like formalizing, consistency, structured time in order for staff to be able to collaborate. Speaking to what our teachers have already said, and that is within a content area and even across disciplines as well. And again, the ultimate purpose is improving teaching and learning in order to improve student achievement.
And so many people are probably saying, well, we know you have a couple of professional development days that you already have in place. And we actually do. And to speak to that point, we have 2 professional development days in the beginning of the year, which are very well spent, and I think that you appreciate. Superintendent Mary Gormley and Assistant Superintendents John Phelan and Matt Gillis, they go over a wide variety of things that need to be done every year in terms of the professional development and making sure all staff members are on the same page. The whole entire district is there. Very valuable, very important, needed, but it doesn't give us that collaborative time on that day to kind of work together on some of the student learning and things that we hope that, or we would like to have more of. The second day, on August 28th, we did a lot of work on engaging all learners. I think you heard Kathy Quayle and Tom Shaw refer to the exercise that many of the staff members led under the leadership of John Phelan, Assistant Superintendent John Phelan. Again, that served as a motivation, served as a springboard for some of the work that we want to do. And then we have the upcoming August 5th Professional Development Day, in which we have plans, again, to talk about the 21st century learning expectations, increasing student achievement, improving instructional practices, and we're going to continue that work. And then the buck stops there, so to speak. We do have several more principals meetings that we have once a month on a Wednesday, the first Wednesday of each month. But that's pretty much the only time I get an opportunity to speak with the teachers to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page with things that are happening within the building. So after that, we're relying on the impromptu conversations that people are having that Tom Shaw alluded to. And I got to tell you, I can confirm that. I saw Tom Shaw having a conversation in the cafeteria today with Mrs. Derby, the art teacher, on how to make connect with kids and make the learning in a more positive learning experience. So what we're going to propose, and we're getting to this a little bit more, is we're going to propose a couple of half days that we would like to propose as a pilot for later in the year. And it would be 5 days, January, February, March, April, and May. And we'll get into those proposals a little bit more. We originally were thinking about starting in the fall, but out of respect to the parents and out of respect to everyone involved, we knew that it would be a significant change in individual schedules, not just the schedule of the students, but the families as well. And so out of respect to that, we looked and said, how can we kind of tailor this and change it a little bit and present a proposal that we feel as though is equitable or fair enough and gives people enough time to kind of prepare for those days.
And with the Collaborative Time Committee, we began to meet in the spring of last year, and there were about 12 of us, including Mr. Nelson, Mr. Shaw, Ms. Crowley, as well as Mrs. Quealy. And so when the others were not able to make it this evening, but with the 12 of us that met, we had a charge, and the charge was to create proposals that we could share with our leadership team, that we could share with our superintendents, in which we would create the collaborative time needed for staff to work together. And as a part of this, we had 5 meetings, and what we did was we had the charge of calling other schools, just to get an idea of what other schools are doing. We understand that what we created had to be specific to Milton High School, who we are, what our needs are. So it's not just about doing what someone else does, but it's just about getting ideas. And so with the calls that we made, we contacted 41 schools, and just in summary, 37 of the 41 schools have early release days so that staff can come together to work on curriculum, instruction, assessments. In terms of for late starts, there were 4 out of the 41 schools that said that they do a late start. And with the data that we collected, again, it was through phone calls, we looked at their websites as well. And with a couple of the schools that we called that do late starts, it was interesting that there were a couple of them that said, yeah, we do them, but we're talking about changing it. You know, we don't really like the late start. So it's interesting that the vast majority were saying we do early releases to create time for staff to be able to work together. And so what our committee did was, originally we had 3 proposals. And so one of our proposals was involved a slightly early release. So the students would leave at about 1:30. That would be the beginning of 7th period, so that staff could begin to meet and then meet beyond the contractual day. So that would create, you know, we wanted to create some time for staff to meet in that way. And when we looked at it, our committee, through research, following up with Matt Gillis, following up with the union as well, reviewing our contract, it would cost more than $30,000 to do Proposal 3. And so when we saw that figure, we're like, okay, we need to keep in mind that these are difficult economic times. What other proposals will we also come up with? We really talked about it and looked across the gamut. Proposal 2 involves a late start, and so I'll talk in detail about that. And Proposal 1, an early release, which for the Collaborative Time Subcommittee, 100% of the committee said that's the one we prefer. We like that one the most amount of time that's there as well in order to do what we need to do. And in terms of as a staff, because we did present this information to the staff, we did so at the end of last year, because again, we received the letter from NEASC, sometime after May 14th when they sent it saying, okay, here's the special progress report, here are the commendations, here are the recommendations. And so fortunately, we had already begun, as Mr. Jett said, some of the preliminary work in kind of coming up with some ideas, because we knew that we needed collaborative time. And so we also presented the information to the staff as well. And you're having trouble hearing me? Do you want me to switch mics?
No, I just wondered if the mic was okay, because it's not different.
Testing. Just got to talk into it.
Is it working? Can you hear me now?
I mean, I can
It's
hear
still,
you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But it's not.
it did pop
it's
down
not
suddenly. I can try the other one.
Might want to ask Mr. Lynch.
Maybe it's a battery. Can you hear me? Is it better?
Yes.
I'm glad. Thank you. And so what we found that as a staff, that 99% of our staff members said, we like the early release. There were 2 staff members who said, I like the late start. So there were 2 staff members who said they preferred the late start. And we also shared this information with the PTSFO because we wanted to get their input as well. And they said, yeah, they said we like the early release as well. They said we don't see any problems with it. We support it. Sounds like a good idea. And the same for the site council. We also spoke to the site council because it was important to us to get their feedback as well. And they said the same things as well, saying that they as well supported the early release. And they saw the benefits of teachers needing that time. And with this, I know that, we've mentioned that this is a pilot program. And with the pilot, let's get into some of the specifics. And so ultimately, with the proposals that we share with you, the first one being an early release. Originally, the committee wanted to have 7 early release days during the course of the year. The first one being October, the next one being December, and then January, February, March, April, and May. 7 of them for 3 hours each. But we understand that, because of when we received the NEASC letter, because of the wrapping up of last school year, that we need time to communicate with families. We need to make sure that all of our families, the staff, that the community, that everyone is aware of when those dates are, so that we can make sure that everyone's able to prepare accordingly. So, as Mr. Jett said, we're proposing 5. We're proposing 5 for this year, this pilot year, beginning in January. And beginning in January, the 5 meetings, 3 hours each, would give us a total of 15 hours for this first year, for this pilot year. So when you see the 21 was the original number. Originally, if we could have, idealistically, if we could have begun in October. Some of the things that we have considered with the early release, with students being released at 11:16 in the morning, and then staff being able to work from 11:45 to 2:45. Some of the things that we talked about were, okay, what about transportation for our students? Because it would be the high school students only who would be getting that early release in this pilot year. And so we've already done research just to look into the cost. So we were told that buses, according to last year's figures, were about $90 per bus. And so we would get about 2 to 4 buses, so that we would have buses that would go to East Milton and buses that would go to West Milton. This is a system that we do currently use when we have mid-year exams and final exams, because the high school students get out earlier than the other schools. So we have done that in terms of using the late buses.
If I could just add a comment about the late buses. We're looking at it in terms of the model that the Pierce Middle School currently has for the late buses after school. Maybe running 2 buses depending on needs, possibly 4. If we go to 4, it'd be 2 buses to East Milton, 2 buses to West Milton, to make sure with abbreviated stops to make sure all of the kids get home safely. So we fully understand, again, that it is a wrinkle in individual schedules, but if we get the approval to move forward and have enough time to advertise it and continuously remind people and put those dates out in advance, our hope is that the confusion or the challenge around the transportation will be minimized. And when I say minimized, not minimized to the individual schedules, but hopefully minimized to the amount of confusion on those days. Proposal 2.
So in terms of Proposal 2, the late start, because this is something that we also talked about as well. We wanted to look at every option in terms of creating time for teachers to work together. So with Proposal 2, students arrive at 9:45 because teachers would have time from 7:45 to 9:15, an hour and a half, in order to have that collaborative time. And again, the school day would begin at 9:45. And the committee decided to have 9 of these days, October, December, January, February, March, April, May, and June. And they decided on having more days because it's less time. It's an hour and a half less time than Proposal 1 with the early release. One of the reasons why the committee decided that on a school start time of 9:45 is because they felt that starting any later than 9:45 would be so late in the day for the students. They just didn't want the students to come in any later. We do indeed, for PSAT Day, we do have a late start for half of our school because for PSAT Day, we have our sophomores and juniors take the PSAT so that the freshmen and the seniors come in later. And so that is something that we've done in terms of doing that on that particular day. With this proposal, it would create 13 and a half hours if we had begun in October. Again, we would not want to begin in October in this pilot year. So for Proposal 2 and Proposal 1, one of the things we also kept in mind was collective bargaining. We wanted to come up with proposals that would be beneficial to the entire community, that would really be able to work, and that we would be able to begin this current school year. And so one of the advantages that we found with Proposals 1 and 2 is that it doesn't involve collective bargaining. But my last point is just that one of the curious questions that you may have is that with an early release or a late start, what's the impact on the school day in terms of time, in terms of even instructional time? And so we've talked about that as a committee as well as the advisory. There was also an advisory subcommittee that really delved into that. And so what we talked about was doing a restructuring of the advisory program so that we can have that additional time for instruction, but then in addition to that, we could have that time for collaborative time and not negatively impact the students.
So when we talk about the advisory period, I think Michelle Cruz, Vice Principal, will give you some feedback and background on the advisory period.
So with the advisory period, it's a program that's required by NEASC, where students each have somebody to look to in the school besides their guidance counselor, and that they will help guide them through the whole school process. So somebody in addition to the guidance counselor. They're to know the students well and to assist them in achieving the school's learning expectations. We took a look at our advisory period last year. We had an ad hoc committee meet in the spring of 2012 to review what we were doing with the advisory period, and then they had some findings after they did a little research. They found that faculty advisors should meet individually with each of the students once per term, that on average they need 4 to 5 sessions per term to meet individually with each of their students, and the meetings were approximately 5 to 7 minutes long. And with that minimum requirement, they were able to establish a decent relationship with the students, and one that will carry on for 4 years. So we decided to take that information and restructure the advisory period. And with this restructuring, we're able to reallocate some of the time we were using for advisory to go towards increased instructional time, and then hopefully to get some collaborative time for the faculty. We sent a letter home to parents explaining the restructuring. This year there are 21 advisory periods. Group guidance, which also meets during that same period of time, will still continue to meet, and I'll speak about group guidance in just a moment. And again, as I mentioned, the plan is to reallocate that time to go towards more instructional time, and then hopefully towards collaborative time for our teachers. So for group guidance, just a reminder of what group guidance is, because we do use the advisory period for group guidance also. Group guidance is a developmental counseling program for the students. It's to help them achieve optimal growth. It's to help prepare them for the expectations for outside of school, the college process, etc. Things that happen in group guidance, well, they connect with the Naviance program, which is a for college placement. They do a learning style inventory. They do a career interest inventory. They get the college process information out. There's a whole list of items up on the screen. There we go. So what we had the guidance counselors do is they met over the summer for 3 days. They had 3 professional development days over the summer that were paid for them to revamp the group guidance program, to maintain the integrity of the program, while optimizing the use of our time in the day. So to adjust it to these 21 sessions, and plus they have some additional sessions that they added to that. So not only are they having the small group guidance sessions, but they have some larger sessions planned, because it was very important that they maintain the integrity of the program. Now this group guidance program, in addition to this, they also have additional meetings with the students. Outside of group guidance, there are individual meetings also. So that's not part of the group guidance, that's something separate. With the group guidance revamp, they've also included a new 3-way meeting with senior parents and the guidance counselor and the student. Senior parents have already received contact from the guidance counselor to make an appointment to talk about the college process, financial aid, et cetera. And those meetings have already started this year, and that's something new that we've never had before.
Okay, so again, the overall purpose of this whole collaborative time and group guidance and advisory period, again, is all with the central focus of the student, and how do we continue to reach every kid, make sure no kid falls through the crack, and we continue to enhance student achievement. We fully understand the bar's been set, but we want to exceed that bar. And so again, the reallocating of the time for the advisory period and group guidance is what gives us more instructional time. And then the final slide that we put up there is just in recognition of some of our subcommittee members and ad hoc committee members who really invested a lot of time coming in before school, staying after school, trying to meet, out making phone calls, doing a little bit of research, all to kind of come together and provide a nice little proposal for the school committee, and hopefully one that's approved by the school committee and the families appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask you, you mentioned the advising time. For people who don't have kids in the high school, could you explain what the advising period was like before as opposed to the after? I mean, if you can do block scheduling and stuff in 30 seconds.
we used to have block schedules most weeks in the school year, not every single week in the school year, and then we would have during each block day, and there were 2 block days a week, we would have a 35-minute advisory period in that time. And so that was the time that was used to meet with the students, and for group guidance, and for some other makeup work, et cetera. Assemblies.
Assemblies were used. Student leaders did activities during that time. They met with, we had our special education staff working with students. They did boys and girls group that we thought were very productive in terms of making sure kids get connected, very similar to the co-taught model, having mentors and role models and working with students, again, all with the premise of trying to improve it. But that period last year, obviously, we're looking to revamp it as we would do any given year. How do you improve what you're currently doing? And this is one of the ways that we're trying to do it.
Any other questions? I'm sure there are some.
Should I start, or do you all want to start?
Anyone who'd like.
Okay. I think it's great, all the work that you've done, and this is a great subject to bring to our attention. And, you're the educators, you're the expert on this, and you bring it to us through the superintendent. Superintendent says this is what's academically correct, this is the right way for our system to go. And, we say yes. And I think you've met the criteria in the work that you've done for it. I'm sure other people, too, besides me, feel like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and we're going to, we need to go forward with this. A couple of questions and a couple of points. One is that I think it's important for people to understand that you guys have kids in front of you all day. Mm-hmm. So at my job, even though I work and do some stuff in the school system, I also work for a hospital. So we have meeting times. We have the ability to meet because we don't have patients or kids in front of us nonstop. Well, some of us do, but but you don't. You have kids that have to be supervised all day long. So therefore, you do, by contract, get some some planning time for yourself, as you should, but you don't have that common time, and I think that's really important for people to understand. And I think it's really particularly important with all that's going on with us, we're looking for the integration of things like kids with learning challenges, kids in the honors program, kids in the AP classes, high-stake testing, across the curriculum that you spoke about. Like, we need all of that to happen, so I think that that's really important. So those are my points, and then I had a couple of questions, if I can just keep going, and then I'll be done, and you all can talk. I know why we belong to NEASC, but I don't know if everybody knows why we belong to NEASC. I mean, my understanding is that it makes us our kids competitive for college, that when you apply to colleges, attendance in NEASC is fairly important. Am I missing, is that the reason why? Is there other parts of why we belong to NEASC, or is that?
And I think you want to finish what you said. I think, and I'm not sure if it was caught in her presentation, because it was probably a lot to absorb, and Yolanda Beach very eloquently stated that. Again, it makes, Milton prides itself on having a very high academic, high achieving institution, and having that stamp of approval from the NEASC committee makes our students that much more competitive when they're out applying to the four-year colleges and universities. And that is one of the biggest things that I see as a benefit to the town of Milton.
Okay.
May I add something about NEASC? This organization accredits high schools really around the world. And so they're research-based, and they know the criteria, they know the standards, they know by which a high school should be evaluated. And so they go into, they're an independent organization. You prepare this self-study for 2 years. You look at yourself. And one of the members, I think maybe Kathy alluded to, when the group comes in, the independent group made up of practitioners, teachers, department heads, superintendents, they have a chairperson. They study before they come, all the documents, all the curriculum, the self-study. They interview parents and teachers and students. They travel with students from class to class. They interviewed the school committee. And so they know we can have internal groups we can look at ourselves. We could get, one of the prior superintendents used to create a group of retired department heads and superintendents to come in and evaluate departments. But when NEASC comes in, they know what makes an outstanding high school. They know the bar. They accredit high schools around the world. Dr. Arangio travels on the international group that goes across Europe into high schools that want to be accredited by NEASC. So they have a very, very high standard. The reporting mechanism for the next 10 years is very stringent. When we have to send in the letters, the school committee will know that we show the school committee the letters that are sent by the principal. There's a commitment from high school principals to report honestly and fairly to NEASC. And again, they follow the recommendations that have been put in place. It's really a professional obligation of the staff, and if you're committed to NEASC and the school system, to come up with a plan to implement and meet the recommendations from NEASC.
In addition to that, when I'm listening and thinking about the question that you've asked, which is such a great question, so that everyone understands the value of NEASC, this is my 16th year working here at Milton High School, I'm very proud to say. And before I started working here, I worked in Boston, and I did youth mentoring. And I remember that there was a student that I was mentoring, a high school student, and she was explaining to me that her school had lost its accreditation. And she was saying, I'm really scared, my mother's going to pull me out of the school because I want to go to college, and, my mother's concerned that the colleges, that I'm going to have a hard time getting into schools because my school has lost its accreditation. And so it was interesting to hear this high school student with this concern, attending a public school, and she was concerned that that her future was now at stake, and that her mother would have to pull her out. And she and her friends were talking about this. So that is something that I remembered. We had another question.
Becky.
I just have just some clarification questions.
Swing your mic,
Sorry. It sounds like you're trying to rework the advisory period to help with the collaboration time. So I'm just unclear of if the advisory period time is during the school day, how is that fitting in with the after, like early releasing of students? Can you just be a little more clear on that?
You want me to speak to it? We had 2 per week.
Yeah, we used to have 2 advisory periods per week. So, and it was during the school day. So what we're trying to do is we put that time, more than, a little bit more than half that time back into the school day as instructional time. So if we have the early release days, that means that we're still going to actually have more time added in for instructional time, but we'll kind of balance it out so that we take some of that time to put it towards the collaborative time, with the idea of collaborating and increasing student achievement. So we're still actually able to increase instructional time as compared to prior years.
Oh, I see.
And then,
So the students are still going to be gone. They're being released. But it's in terms of total instructional time will stay.
The instructional time will stay the same. And to Chair Pavlichek's question, what did it look like before? And again, it's maximizing, just restructuring that time to make it more productive on the advisory time, the group guidance time, but also on the more collaborative time. So that time that we're saving, we're pulling back. It's just like making an investment and pulling back the rewards. That's what we're trying to do, and then we're taking that time. So it's not taken away from any instructional time. On the days that we have that early release, they have a good equitable amount of time, and we even thought about the possibility of rotating periods, so you're not missing the same classes all the time when you're out of school. So we're just taking that time and using it for collaboration. So the kids still get the advisory, they still get the group guidance, they still get the benefits of both in all of those. The advisors, they're meeting with kids, they're checking in with kids, they're interviewing kids, checking to see how they're doing, what they feel is going well, what they feel needs to be improved, how can they help them improve it. So they're still getting all of those benefits. We're just utilizing that time differently, and then they're leaving early on those days that we're proposing.
Okay.
as of right now, because we don't have the collaborative time days planned, right now all the time has been put into instructional time. So there's a big increase from last year. So if, so it's like you were saying, putting investment and then pulling back a little bit, so.
That makes it more clear. And I was going to ask also, in terms of the advisors, how are they selected for students? Is there, a questionnaire that students answer, like, with the science teacher because he has a great interest in science, or he's the cross-country coach? Is there some kind of discovery?
We've actually talked about that, because the advisory, we had the ad hoc committee in the spring, but we had an advisory committee prior to that to talk about that. Ideally, we would love to have that process where they can self-select, but we haven't been able to figure out how to evenly distribute the students. So as of right now, we have it organized alphabetically through grade homework. And then there's some special select groups, like the boys group and the girls group, the student leaders who have specific advisors that they meet with. The majority of the students are arranged alphabetically.
And I have another question, sorry. So in terms of the, I know you contacted other schools, and that's great. Did they have a number of dates, like what they have, and also what did NIASC recommend? Do they have hours that they're recommending you work collaboratively that we can follow? Is there something there?
And I apologize, we have all of the districts that reached out and made phone calls to find out the number of days that they have for professional development, how many were early release, how many were late. If you look under the late start column, you'll find that some of the districts didn't have too many. The schools that are bolded, I believe the 10 to 12, the Bay State Conference, or schools that sometimes, and we have many of the schools that Milton compares themselves to. But we did ask that. We asked questions about how do you feel about it. Again, I think Mrs. Beach alluded to it. Some people a small number of people had the late start, but they didn't feel comfortable with the late start. They wanted the early release. They did have some challenges. I was actually working the principals last night at a MIA meeting and asking them, getting more feedback on them in preparation for this meeting. And again, they said that they went through these challenges, but to your point in terms of how much is recommended, there's no recommendation.
Okay, yeah, doesn't surprise me. Thank you.
Wow. Mr. Walker.
If I could just add one thing
Go ahead.
to the time issue. There's no set recommendation, but it's enough that you need to have enough, and they state that you need to have enough to make the process for analyzing student work and collaboration ongoing and consistent and formalized. So that can vary, and that has a lot of different models. But it has to be ongoing and not kind of the drive-by professional development that we have sometimes seen.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker, you had your hand up.
I did. If you go back to your benefits slide, it seems to be a combination of ways that you will use collaborative time, in at least one case, how you might support the use of that time, and then finally, one or two outcomes that you would hope to accomplish. So let me be specific. Analysis of student work, curriculum revision and enhancement, improving teaching and instruction, developing interdisciplinary units, collaboration on creation, analysis, and revision, review of grading practices. All of those seem to be very productive ways that you would use this time, and I'm completely on board. This makes perfect sense. Ongoing support from a mentor would seem to be something that would continue over time, so the way that you would support the use of this time and make it more productive. But I want to press you a little bit on increased student achievement and increased teacher retention, because I think what you're saying is that there may be some indirect benefit, and this would appear to have a positive impact, but I don't think you're saying that this will have a direct and measurable impact on student achievement and teacher retention. But if you are, then my follow-on question would be, okay, how will you measure that, and what metrics will we use to measure that?
So we talked about this. We were looking at student data, the survey of students, the collaboration conversation with teachers. When we talked about sharing practices, and to give you an example, coming from the Pierce Middle School, we have a small resemblance of common planning time where they're set up in teams and they have it. Having teachers come together and looking at student work and having them graded individually and having and sharing those practices. You may go from one English teacher to the next English teacher and have a very similar product, and they grade it totally different. Pushing kids on the rigor, helping support them. We have a number of new teachers this year. To your point in terms of talking about teacher retention and giving them the support, helping them not only from the standpoint of mentoring them and having them get acclimated to the school, the building, but helping them with the instructional practices. I would love to sit here and say to you that I have 10 concrete ways that I could say that we measure it, but I would say student data, test results, formative, summative assessments, common assessments, making sure that we're giving that feedback ongoing to teachers on an ongoing basis.
May I, Mr. Walker,
Sure.
add one? This is very, very concrete. We had, with Mr. Jett being new at the high school, we brought the college board in. And the college, we give the PSAT to all of our, you heard, sophomores and juniors. And there is work to be done with the high school staff. We have a meeting with the English and Math department head tomorrow to work with the teachers to use that PSAT data. Right now, for the superintendent, giving the PSAT sets a tone for all students to then take the SAT. John Phelan is the biggest advocate of that's expected in the Milton Public Schools, by students, by families, by everyone. But there's such data in that PSAT results that the College Board has analyzed. If you analyze the PSAT results with the English teacher, you identify strengths and weaknesses to then differentiate on every student to the point of creating units, that the correlation to increasing SATs, they have researched how many points you can raise. They can actually make, they analyzed for us how, if you start at the 6th grade, getting ready for the SAT and the AP, you use that PSAT data, how you can drive SAT scores. That's not work that you do during your lunch period or after school. So I probably have 20 ideas that would drive student instruction for the staff if they had that quality time to sit and meet and collaborate. But that's one perfect example that would drive student instruction, student achievement.
Great. So here, this is going to be a recurring theme for me this year. If you're going to increase student achievement, then I want to know where and by how much. And if you're going to reduce teacher attrition or increase retention, I want to know where and by how much. If we make those statements, then we've got to be a lot more precise about where we'll see those improvements. Because we're allocating time and resources, and there's only a limited amount of both of those things.
If we are providing collaboration time, our evaluation tool and what it will look like in the future can reflect successful collaboration time, because we talk about teacher retention, teacher job satisfaction, all the ways on which teachers are evaluated when they're in their administrative cycle as well as their independent cycle can reflect aspects of this that can give us back data that can be helpful not only to a department head or to a mentor, but also to the mentoring program and to the hiring staff and to central office as we talk about what teachers are doing well or what they're not doing well based on what has been the result of collaboration. So I think that the evaluation tool can be used on a way of measuring some of this success.
I understand that, but student achievement and teacher retention are two very specific things. So if we say those are outcomes, then we'll need to measure those to make sure that we achieved what we set out to achieve. Let me move to the NEAS slide, and I'm going to apologize in advance to Mr. Jett because I started this discussion with Dr. Arangio on the team. I think that we've got 7 bullets here. This is the time-related recommendation slide. Say that? Slide 6. I asked early on, at the first briefing on NEASC, for a dialogue on, with regard to these recommendations, how would we prioritize them? That is, which ones do we think are most important, or do we think they're equally important? And what is our plan for accomplishing the outcomes that we expect to accomplish, and what are those educational outcomes? Similar to what you did on the benefits slide for the collaborative time, what are the educational outcomes we expect to achieve by doing these things? Because we might say in some cases, well, that's very interesting, but we're not going to devote our time to that. And I think that the school committee deserves the opportunity to be a part of that prioritization. And I still haven't gotten that detailed discussion of, for each of these recommendations, what's our plan, what time period is required to accomplish the plan, what resources are required, and what do we expect the educational outcomes to be. So I'm going to repeat again that I would like that discussion before we get to the point where we're responding to NEASC in February, because I think the school committee needs to weigh in on what we think the priorities are, including what the 21st century learning expectations are. What are they? And do we think they're important? And if we do, have we allocated the necessary resources? This is the right time of the year to be having that discussion because we're about to build the budget for next year, but we have to have that discussion. So before we launch into a lot of work and time and effort on this, I want to have that discussion. And this is the 3rd time I've asked for it.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I thought the 10 recommendations, actually there's 7 here, I thought they were the ones we had to do, that we don't get to prioritize them, that we have to do them from NEASC?
No.
Am I wrong in that?
Yes.
Actually, these ones that are on here are just the ones that are time-related. So I can address some of the questions that you have or comments that you have. We had met at the end of last year in April, March and April, after we got the report back, to start working out a sequence. We had a sequencing committee to sequence it out.
I remember.
And then in May, we received the letter. So we actually have a sequence kind of planned out in a draft form that we need to cross-reference with the letter, because the letter from NEAS actually tells us which ones we have to address. It prioritizes it for us. So for the special report, I mean, in some sense, it groups it. The first group that we need to address for the special progress report in February, and then the next group, and then the third group. So from that, though, we have to cross-reference it with the document that we have, the draft form, and make sure that we're hitting all the items.
Sorry, I can't speak for your conversation with Dr. Arangio last year, but what I will say is
Noted.
that... Huh? Excuse me?
Noted.
Okay, thank you. What I will say, to your point about the 21st century learning expectations, we just had a meeting this morning, 7 o'clock, with the subcommittee, again, really defining it and really working on that. We have these subcommittees that looking at these different recommendations. When you talk about sequencing, for me, jumping on board, I'm trying to get a good handle on that as well. My hope is that we could give you more concrete, measurable things, and that's what we talked about this morning. When we're defining these things, to your point, what is it, how are you going to do it, and how are you going to measure it? And that's what we're kind of ironing out. But in fairness to the process, and there's a lot of work that's been done, the letter came out, as we alluded to, the 16th of May, which was dated 16th of May. We probably got it a few days later. The high school was, pretty much closing out the end of the year. And we're up for that challenge in terms of, and hopefully we give you the information that you're exactly asking for.
Great. And then I'll close with an easier technical question. So we're obligated to have a response from NEAS mid-February, and your schedule doesn't start the collaborative time discussions until January. Isn't that problematic?
It's problematic on a couple of situations, for a couple of reasons. One, that recommendation, again, came out in May. To change it and put something in place for September, October, November, probably wouldn't have been received favorably by the general public, for the people who had no knowledge of that.
I understand that
But
problem.
what it says is you're putting something, you're implementing something, and you're showing progress to make sure that you get to that. So what we're doing, it is a progress report. It is not the final report card. It's illustrating that you're implementing something, you have a plan to implement something, and you're making progress to achieve that ultimate goal.
I just wanted to add something to that. When NEASC came in March of this year, they did a workshop with us, and a few other schools were here. So we met right here in this space, in which other schools who were evaluated at the same time of year in the fall of 2011, in which they basically explained to us the process of responding and the various reports we would have to respond to. And so they laid everything out, which definitely informed our work with the sequencing committee in terms of teaching us, okay, here's how you need to prioritize. You will receive a letter. The letter will be the special, it may refer to a special progress report. We kind of got a sense that we might get a special progress report, things that we would have to address sooner. And so they've definitely informed us on how to do that and how they want us to report back to them. With respect to the learning expectations, one of the things that they've also said to us and that we talked about a lot is the fact that as we are looking at and revamping our learning expectations, the committee that's doing it, working in a variety of different disciplines, that committee also has the charge for looking at the measuring of each one. And so for that continuity, of that process, it's so important that as we create them, that thinking is also, okay, whatever we're creating, how will we measure? And so that's been the ongoing conversation and the work for each and every point. So I just wanted to just make mention to that fortunately, they've been very helpful with that.
And with
just-
measuring.
Can I just one follow on there? And I just hope I've been clear enough that I think the school committee needs an opportunity to weigh in on what those are and how they're prioritized.
You wanted to jump.
Oh, I was just saying with the measuring, the task of measuring all the learning expectations, that we are expected to report out on on an individual basis for each of our students on how they're achieving them, and also as a school-wide basis to, school committee and community, et cetera. So.
Ms. Kelly.
First of all, Thank you very much for all the time and effort that has gone on to this process so far, and I'm sure you're busy on all the other things that have been mentioned here. Just to piggyback on Mr. Walker's point, I believe, at least two members of this committee believe it's very important that before plans get underway, that the school committee is given an opportunity to review them and say yes. And the one thing I think we've been asking for quite a long time now is the 21st century learning expectations. It may be that the Milton School Committee believes that there are some standards that need to be higher than what's established. And I think that's where we need to be able to look at this and be able to discuss it and say, you know what, here's the charge. And I think that's what we're looking for. Would you agree? Okay. And so that's not only just the 21st learning, but it's all of the work that you're going about. We need the opportunity to see what it is, to be able to fit it all together, to prioritize in terms of the way we think it. I mean, we may go back to you and say, yep, what you have here is terrific, go for it. But I think what we're asking for is the opportunity to do that. And I'm not sure how, and I think this is more on the administration rather than you folks. You know, how do we set that in place and make sure that we have that plan together? The other thing is on this proposal, I don't see how this is not collective bargaining. And as I was sitting here listening to it, it's the first time we've ever had collective bargaining done essentially in public, because that's what it is, unless I'm totally missing something. So right now in your contract, are there high school planning time, certain planning time, whether it's minutes, periods, et cetera, described in the contract? Does anybody know?
Prep time, but it's not collaborative.
You think you need to show that?
There's prep time, but it's not collaborative time.
But the prep time is delineated, correct?
On an average, yes.
Right, but there are parameters around it. In other words...
Can I raise a point of order? We have the union president here. She's shaking her head when you're saying this is collective bargaining. She's saying no. So I think we need to clarify whether it is or isn't before we go down this road of talking about contract terms and whether it is or it isn't.
Yes, recognize Margaret.
We used to have early release days. They weren't bargained. The school committee, the previous superintendent put that time in for professional development. The school day is start to end. The way you structure that school day, outside of what we've already bargained as prep time, duty time, lunch time, you can structure this day to look exactly the way option 1 was up there. We were very aware, and I was on these committees, and I didn't sit over here because I didn't want this to become a union kind of collective bargaining piece. We've had these discussions prior to James with Yolanda and Dr. Rangio, Michelle, Brian Board. There was a whole laundry list of characters involved in this. And as long as the day didn't change in terms of start and end time, the way the day was structured is perfectly within the purview of the principal with, in conjunction with the superintendent.
Right, and I appreciate that's your opinion. I would argue, as a school committee member, our goal is to get as many hours in front of kids as we can, and I believe this proposal interrupts that, although I don't exactly know the math, right? So I would love to see the math drawn out. And it also provides more planning time as opposed to a planning time is, unless I'm losing my mind, very clearly delineated in the contract.
This isn't planning time. Respectfully, this isn't planning time.
Okay.
This is collaborative time across disciplines.
Right.
To
It's
do
collaborative
specific
time.
work.
Yeah.
Planning time is my own personal time that I am working on my lesson plans for the next day or my project for the classroom.
And again, this is where I would present to you that I think collaborative time is something that should be written into the contract. And therefore, I totally appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I think we need legal counsel, and I didn't realize that this was being presented as outside of the contract. I thought it was being proposed as something that would be put into the contract. And so from that respect, I think the school committee needs to revisit this perhaps in executive session and take it up from that perspective. What I would like to see is what is the impact on student learning? Because one of the things we always talk about is it's time on task time in front of you very gifted teachers, we always would argue would like to have more, would like longer days, would like longer school years. These are the things that we have to weigh as we're thinking about how these changes are being made. I can't agree more, working in the business world, how important collaboration among departments is. And I can't imagine how beneficial it will be to you folks to have that time. So I'm not here saying I don't think that we should have it. The question is, how should we do it in this year, if that's what's being proposed, that will basically give you folks an opportunity to start this process, but also give us the ability to do it the right way.
If that's how the committee feels, I would find no problem in signing an MOA tomorrow morning with supporting proposal number 1 and putting it in the contract.
Right. And I appreciate that. And so I guess that's something for the school committee to discuss, and then to figure out what the best way forward is. But one of the things, just in terms of presenting it as a pilot, I am concerned about kids being dismissed halfway through the day. I would be interested to hear, because just looking at this list, I am really appreciative that you put this list together, because the impression that was given, it sort of sounded like everybody was doing what was being proposed in proposal number 1. And I think what's here is fairly different from that. And so I would be interested to hear how other communities and what they're doing when the kids are dismissed. Is there anything going on? Does the park department help? I'm not sure how it works, but are there things going on out there that can engage kids? Because one of the things we're always concerned about as parents, as school committee members, as community members is free time and kids and what happens. And I also would be interested to hear, okay, for sports, do sports get canceled that day? Do kids come back? How do they get back? All those kinds of things are things that I think that we need to think about for a proposal like this. Again, I'm fully supportive of figuring out a way to have the Milton High School, and again, I would look to see what kind of planning time or collaborative time there is at the elementary, at the middle school, and the high school. But I would like to see how it's going to impact kids and hear about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was just going to change my hat to be a 10th grade parent. I certainly have had many kids come through here, 3 kids, and non-drivers. And just to give an example, my sophomore plays football. He's very involved in the school programs. And I do what most Milton mothers do, and I'm a part of a carpool. So there's myself and 2 other mothers. So it becomes my responsibility just once every other day. So these 5 days, it would be my responsibility once maybe. So I think that, we kind of have it figured out, the parents in town, a lot of the time with sports, double sessions, they have to be here in the morning and then back in the afternoon. And I think we could check with the athletic director, but I think that the attendance is very good. So it has been done. I don't think it's something really, really new for us,
Right.
So just to speak.
I guess I try and think about all kids, right? All kids' parents aren't available to do the carpooling. So it definitely will take coordination. I think that's great. I appreciate the fact that in your proposal, you're saying not starting October, but starting January. Gives us time to sort of iron out some of these things. But I guess what I'm saying is, I want this to be paramount. There's no doubt that this will impact student learning, in my opinion, right? To Mr. Walker's point, I think we need to figure out to establish how we're going to measure that, right? But I think we need to understand what the impact is on the kids, because that's really what our paramount objective is here. And I think we need a little bit more details on that. And I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this.
Ms. Jones.
There's so many good points that are being brought up. I probably see some of it a little bit differently in terms of I do rely on the educators and the superintendent's office to tell me as a school committee member this is a good thing educationally. And I question it as well. I mean, I never just, you know that.
That's important.
But just the other day, I was reading a study for a workshop that I was given that talked about teachers after 4 years who leave because they feel like they didn't get enough support nationwide. So to me, when you speak about the support and the retention of teachers, I think Milton probably has a very good retention rate because we have a great school system, because we have great new buildings. But I do think that teachers new to the profession have a higher tendency to leave after a couple of years, and one way to keep them is to increase the support. So for me, that's enough to keep going with this, and answering these questions is a good idea, but that to me is very important, teacher support. I thought you said the time was taken, that we would have the same amount of instructional time, that we're taking it from the advisory periods where kids are not in front of teachers, or they're doing other activities, but they're not in a classroom receiving instruction. So that's where this time is coming from. I thought that's what you said. Or no?
Do you mind if I take a stab?
Please.
Go ahead. So, when talking about this process regarding potentially having early release time, and also talking about the advisory period, and also talking about group guidance, those are three separate conversations that have come into one area together to combine how we feel that the time can be better allocated for Milton High students. So if we go backwards a year, we would say that every child had a group guidance period once a week, and if I'm wrong, I'm looking for 2 years ago. Once a week, and if I'm wrong, let me know, because I just want to clarify for the public in nice, easy, user-friendly terms.
Yeah, not every child, so.
No, I'm sorry. There was time allocated once a week, 2 times a week, for a half an hour, where students would be in a group guidance period, that only a quarter of the population would actually get the group guidance, and the other 3 grades would have a period where they would be able to meet with teachers, do homework, et cetera. So that time was there twice a week. That was about an hour a week. An hour a week times 40 weeks of school is 40 hours. The proposal on the table in regards to group guidance was to have the guidance counselors meet over the summer, create efficiencies in how they provided their group guidance, that they could do so in different ways throughout the school year with less time in front of students during the school year. So instead of using 40 hours for that work, of which they only engaged a quarter of the students at a time, they decided to shrink that down and combine it with the advisory obligation they had, which are separate things. Group guidance is the guidance counselors. The advisory period is a period where children are in a lower class size with one teacher for all 4 of their years, getting that contact by a special person in the building that they can relate to. By shrinking that period to 1 period a week of a half an hour, we're saving a substantial amount of hours throughout the whole year. Some of those hours were put back into the classroom in relation to increased classroom time and instructional time for students. What this plan is trying to say, that the net effect of going home early for 3 or 4 days during the year still gives us more instructional time on balance when we combine all 3 of those conversations. So that was Ms. Padera's question. So we had 40 hours a year. That went down to about 20 hours a year with advisory and group guidance combined, roughly. I might be off of my numbers. And your half days would be 3 hours at 5 is 15. Those extra 5 hours, roughly, would be back into your classroom instructional time. So given where we were from last year to this year, we have a net positive of instructional time, and we are able to provide staff time with each other to collaborate, but with children not in school. Would that be generally accurate? Did that answer your original question, Ms. Padera?
Yeah, I got it right away.
Okay.
It would be great to have that on paper.
Okay.
That is my recommendation. But I guess I would also say to you that 2 years ago, whenever this was first instituted, again, great purpose, right, to get students in front of guidance counselors and get them engaged. That was never a discussion that came before the school committee. So we basically cut what we considered classroom time for a number of kids over the past several years, but never with a discussion from the school committee. Again, this is what I would say to you. This is our paramount job here when we talk about negotiations, et cetera, is to figure out how do we get more classroom time. I appreciate it's gone from last year to this year to more time, and I appreciate what's being presented here. I just think that we need an opportunity to see it all put together, and what concerns me greatly is kids leaving outside of what is the present hours of operation for the school, and what the impact is for kids, you know, who sometimes, unfortunately, can make bad choices, so.
We will provide you a worksheet that has those hours laid out.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple of other points. When we got this list, and thank you for this list very much, I mean, looking at it, I see the number of early release days. There's about 41, you said on here, 41 districts. So there's Milton, Chicopee, Holliston, Silver Lake, are the only ones who have 0 early release days. And then if you look at the total PD days, 5 full, we have 3 full, some have 8 half. So there's a variation among that. But when I look at the half days, and as a working parent, I have to say, I am totally opposed to half days. They're terrible for me as a working parent. I'm sorry. And I do carpool, but it's terrible because that means I have to take the day off to do my carpooling, as you must have to too, since you're a working mom. But anyway, so I do, or any parent. I don't mean to just say working parents, but so they're really hard for me, and especially as really kids do not have access to independent driving until they're seniors. They can't drive their friends if they have their license, so we're talking freshmen, sophomore, and junior kids, and parents and families that are really impacted by this. I do think that that's a big deal. On the other hand, I want this work to be done. So if there's proper notice, if there's planning, I think 7 half days is a lot to ask working parents to, I'm concerned about the impact on parents. I think it's great instructionally, but the impact on parents, I work within a school system, I get a school calendar. Most working parents don't. So we're talking vacations, snow days, plus adding half days of early release. I do think that that's a lot. Saying all that, I am grateful for the idea of a late bus, similar to the bus at Pierce, because all I want to know is that my kids got home safe. And then it's up to me to sort of figure out the supervision, and I do know that that is a major issue. But if my kids can get home, then I'm going to feel better about this. As a working parent, leaving to pick my kid up at 11:15, how can I do that? But if I know he or she can get the bus home, I can live with that a little bit better. But I do think we have to be sensitive about the schedule, and I think it is a lot of time, and I think we need to acknowledge that, and we also need to look at the costs of what the buses, as the late buses for early dismissal would cost us, but I think it's really mandatory that we have some kind of education, transportation to get kids home. I can see Ms. Kelly wants to respond to what I'm saying.
Not necessarily respond, I'm just looking down this list
and sports, too. I wanted to ask about sports. Can I
you
just
like
ask
to-
that?
by all means.
So, and I know that in the summer, we have double sessions, and we're able to do that. I have more flexibility. People take vacations in the summer. I do think it's hard for kids. I'm groaning inside going, and how would I get her back at 3 o'clock for field hockey practice if I get her home at 11 and then she's coming back at 3? So it is real. But we need to have this happen, and we need to think about resources to help happen. But it will impact sports, and I think Ms. Kelly has a good question about, do we not have games on those days? Do we not have practice on those days? Do we have later practices? And that's something in the schedule that we have to really look at. So we agree on that.
Kelly.
So just going down this list, Milton has 3 full days of professional development. So I'm assuming that the early release days, this isn't, something like before Thanksgiving or something. These are all professional development early release days. Right? So this would be helpful to hourize it, right? So that you see how many hours of total professional development each district is giving. Because there are some that have many half-days or early releases, but have no full day of professional development. And so can we look creatively? Because not only does Milton have 3 professional development days outside of the school, the student school year, but we also have 10 hours, correct, outside of the school day or the student, the teacher day and year. And so I guess my point is there, I think we can be very creative, and I would love for us to be creative in this first pilot year. And whether it ends up being what you folks have proposed, that very well may be. But I think there are options here in Milton that we could explore a little bit further if we work together on it.
Mr. Phelan, let's see.
I just wanted to say that I think that this group has done a great amount of work. I know that it is important to them as a faculty to work collaboratively to increase the student achievement of every student at Milton High. It would be great if a pilot could be put in place. I think that the challenge that we have now is to take the feedback from the committee to ensure and firm up the transportation aspect of the proposal as when we make a final proposal, so parents will know, to Kristen Bagley-Jones's point, how their children will get home when they are considering this option. Looking at how we provide these hours of professional development in moving forward, and how they may be how it may evolve over the course of time, and maybe even include other levels in the district would be helpful. And in terms of the number of half-days that we have reduced the schedule, the school calendar by 2 half-days. We used to have a half-day for the second round of conferences, and we used to have a half-day prior to the Thanksgiving holiday, which have been made into full days. So we're hoping that we can work within the parameters of the school committee's approval in accommodating the parents while we try to increase student achievement by providing professional staff with the time to meet. So your input and feedback is appreciated and well noted as we will go back and work on those questions and challenges.
Mr. Walker.
The other new me is more decisions, less talk. So I'm going to move that we accept the time committee's collaborative time proposal number 1, with the understanding that we will work to ensure that there's transportation for students, but this is the proposal that the committee, the leadership team, and the union have lined up behind, and I think we should approve it and move on.
Second.
Ms. Kelly.
So, Mr. Walker, I would appreciate the ability to consult legal counsel before we negotiate in public on a contractual issue.
This is not it's not a contractual issue.
I know that you folks believe that.
We have the union president here.
I'm sorry, but I appreciate that, but the union president is not my legal counsel, the school committee member, and I would prefer to consult with legal counsel around this.
Here's a labor relations tip. When you have the union, the leadership team, management, all lined up, you take the deal.
Thank you for that, counsel, Mr. Walker. But I would ask the committee to defer this vote to the next meeting until such time that we could consult legal counsel.
What's the legal question we're seeking advice on?
Is this a contractual issue? And if it is, it would, to what's been recommended here, be a MOA agreement, which is typically done in executive session, Mr. Walker. That's fine.
I would say that if everyone sitting around here who thinks it's not a contractual issue is wrong, then our vote's meaningless anyway, because we can't make a contract, if it is a contractual issue, the vote is illegitimate. So I have no problem with contacting counsel on this and getting a reading, and I'd have no problem with doing this subject to counsel saying we haven't done anything wrong.
A motion that's been moved and seconded. We can take the vote, and if legal counsel says it was inappropriate or illegal, then we'll come back.
Do we have any other discussion on this? We have a motion on the floor that has been seconded by Ms. Bagley-Jones. Is there any discussion?
I would just like to say, although I wasn't here for your presentation, I have read it carefully and want to say thank you for all the time and effort you've put into this, and I am very excited about the opportunity for Milton High teachers to have a collaborative time when they can work together.
Anything else? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? It's 5-1.
Thank you.
I want to thank the high school team. Thank you very, very much.
Could I raise a point of order? I believe in our minutes, if this wasn't noted as a vote, that we would be out of order with regard to this agenda. Would that be a correct reading of that, Mr. Chairman?
I think not. They made it clear they were seeking our approval for this proposal.
Mrs. Kelly is questioning the absence of the word vote in 5B. I will double check, but I don't believe it's an issue, but I will double check.
Well, to Mr. Walker's point, usually around discussions, the way that we've been doing it is we then go back and answer questions for the committee. That's why I didn't put vote on for this meeting. Usually, out of these discussions, the committee usually asks questions, and then we come back with the answers to the questions.
Well, I believe all the questions except one have been answered, and that one we agreed could be deferred.
I will consult counsel on both issues. If we need to revote it, we will.
Great.
The next item I want to thank the high school team. The next item on the agenda, we had asked, the MCAS scores came out today. We have scheduled, was deliberation whether they would be issued today. They have been made public. We have, in the first October meeting, a presentation that we're going to make on Milton's MCAS scores, but Mr. Phelan's going to make a brief presentation tonight on the release of MCAS scores today.
Good evening, everyone. I just handed you a memo that I have drafted to Superintendent Gormley regarding the release of the 2012 MCAS data that was provided by the state today. We will be doing a full presentation at our next school committee meeting on October 3rd, but wanted to give you some of the highlights quickly as this data has become public, and we wanted to update you and the community in a brief way as to how the district did. So inside this packet, we have for you the district's press release that went out this afternoon, and there will be an email blast to parents tomorrow. The second page of our packet shows the district's status in terms of its accountability status with the state. If you look at page 2, you'll see it's a level 1. This year and moving forward in the state of Massachusetts, there's an entirely new accountability status format that we will have to get used to as a committee and as an administration and as a school community. And they're using level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, level 1 being the best. So we're very happy to announce that the entire district is a level 1 status district. And if you look at the pages that follow, each school has been designated a level 1 school. So this is what would replace the old AYP status that we would report out in previous years. So we are very proud to announce that each of our 6 schools have all achieved the highest level of accountability status from the state of Massachusetts, which is level 1. We are... as noted in the press release, the Milton Public Schools is in the top 25% of the state with being in the category of having the district in all of their schools at level 1. And the district has also been recognized and has been accommodated, given commendation by the state for the Glover School and the Collycott School for raising achievement in high progress in narrowing the achievement gaps. Those are 2 out of the 3 criterion for the Collycott School, so they are receiving and commended by the state. And the Glover School has been commended for its high progress. So we are very excited to have these results on behalf of all the hard work, the teachers and our students and our families and our school committees and all those who participate in the Milton Public Schools. To be able to announce tonight. Also provided in this packet and memo, which is page 9, is you can go right online today and look at all the different backup material if you would like to look through what do some of the new terms mean and how these levels are made. And you can go on and basically see everybody else's scores in a very, very detailed manner right on the DESE website, and I provided you that link. So we look forward to, on October 3rd, doing 2 things. The first thing we will do is explain what this new mechanism looks like and this new accountability format looks like, and give you all the new vocabulary and all the new formulas that demonstrate how the Milton Public Schools has arrived at its accountability status. Then we will provide you with the district scores and each school scores in a limited way, and then we have scheduled already for you each school coming up with their site councils throughout the month of October and early November to actually unpack their individual school scores in relation to teacher, student, and curriculum aspects of their student achievement. So we are very excited to announce this information. We look forward to working this year to increase the student achievement of all students. And lastly, the week of October 3rd, we will be sending out the report card to parents that they receive each year that has all the individual information regarding their child's performance in the 2012 school MCAS test, as well as how the district and the state did in relation to their child's score. So we will provide you that data on October 3rd. We never want to celebrate too high or sulk too low when the scores are fantastic or the scores are just okay, but this is a year where we have a continued forward progress in raising student achievement for all students in the Milton Public Schools, and it is reflected in our highest level of accountability status in the state. So congratulations to the teachers and the students in the Milton Public Schools.
But if I might add, this is a good news story, but someone said to me today, the significance of No Child Left Behind when we do these presentations is that every single student's score is entered in, the name of every single student is evaluated. So we still have achievement gaps. We're making progress, but until, again, what this message should be is that the teachers are working hard, the students are working hard, but there's work to be done every single day till every single student makes the target.
Mr. Walker.
I agree, and Mary, you touched on the point, at least in part, that I was going to make. I think this is largely a good news story, and I'm very proud that every school is now a level 1 school. However, the one subgroup that did not meet target is African American students, and if you look at some of the supporting data, which is not included here, we see that for English language arts, math, and science, for 2012, they did not make any progress in closing the proficiency gap. So I think that's a problem. But I'll look forward to the discussion about how we address that more specifically.
So to that point, that's what I said, when you get these scores, until every single child meets the target, to me, the message is, we know how to raise scores, but the news is you have to raise scores for every single child in the Milton Public Schools. So there's no resting until every group is making the target.
Right, and I would hope that that would be a district-wide discussion rather than an individual school discussion.
Absolutely.
Ms. Kelly.
Just to follow up in terms of who did not meet the target, it's not only African American, but it's also low income.
It's also what?
Low income at Pierce did not meet the target.
No, but overall, low income did meet the target. But overall, African Americans were the only ones who didn't meet the target.
Right, so that's system-wide.
Yes.
But if you look at the individual schools,
Yeah.
African American in some schools did not make it, but also low income at the Pierce. So.
And that's what we'll do. Again, those individuals who watch these presentations, children with IEPs and special education, there were years weren't making the target. And so we have to have every group make the target every single year. And in the presentation, we'll identify the different subgroups as you go through this. The school committee's familiar with, if you don't have a number of children in a particular subgroup, then they're not reported out. We're doing that data for you, counting them by hand. So the African American Black in 3 of the schools didn't have the number to be reported out. We're doing that by hand so we can give you how close they were to the target for the individual schools and coming up with the plan. Thank you.
Dr. Jones.
I want to get back to that point, but what are high needs? We have all students and we have high needs? Is that new?
Yeah,
data?
so part of the new programming in the new accountability status process, they measure you in all students, which is the first line, and then in high needs. And what we will do when we present on the 3rd is define what high needs means. Right now, just off the top of my head, high needs equals students on IEPs, students who receive ELL services, and students who are in the low socioeconomic bracket.
Okay.
So those 3 groups make up that high needs number or bar graph that you would have in front of you. All other subgroups that would make up a school are listed below that. And just in general, to say out loud that every school is responsible to meet a target for all students as one level of target to work towards, to make a separate target for all students in the high needs group, but also to make, we will have individual targets for each subgroup that we service in our public school. So even though they might not be included in the high needs district, every single group of students that exists in the Milton Public Schools will have their own target number for us to reach with them that helps determine whether or not we're meeting the target or not. So I believe the state has done a very good job of breaking down this accountability process by recognizing high student achievement as a piece of information to put into the equation, but also high student growth. And so they're combining those two components to judge how a school does, how a district does, and how a student is doing in making progress. So I look forward to presenting that, the new structure to this group. We'll become familiar with it, and then all the schools that come forward will also be using the same language and the same terminology.
Can I ask another question? Or that was another question, but to get back, so I guess this is a good news story with some not-so-good news story. When you look at the first page and you hear we're level 1, it's fabulous.
Right.
And then I open the sheets and I'm like, oh, whoops, wait a minute here. Oh, this is not good. So I do agree with the points that you both raise, and I think that that's really important for us to keep an eye on. And it is like, so you unwrap the package, it's a beautiful, bright package, and then you unwrap it and you go, oh, this is not what I wanted. So it still is a major priority. And I'm not somebody, as I've said before, I don't necessarily love high-stake testing because I don't think it teaches to the whole child. I'm sorry, it's not popular, but I don't think it always takes into consideration the whole child, except when you look at things like this and you go, oh, wait a minute, there's a segment of our population that isn't getting what we need them to get, so therefore, what are we going to do about it? So I guess it is a good thing that we have this data because it gives us some information on where we need to go. So I think we're going there, and it's good, but we got to keep it up.
I think we need a more focused strategy than we have.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. MCAS.
The viewing audience and the school committee saw Ms. Sheridan come in, and I'd like to recognize Ms. Sheridan tonight. She was at the Rotary, winning and being awarded the Community Volunteer of the Year Award for Milton.
Well served.
Would you like to say a few words?
But I had to leave the evening early because I wanted to get back to the meeting, so, but thank you very much.
She was astounded to see we were only on the second agenda.
Well, Ms. Sheridan told me that one of her children said to her, the irony, you're getting an award, but you're leaving the award to go to the work that you do on a volunteer basis, so. I want to thank the committee for their support and those who attended. We are very proud that Governor Deval Patrick selected Milton out of all of the communities in the state to visit Monday morning to celebrate Massachusetts Harvest Farm to School Week. And here's the little secret that, what was the number of school districts that they referred to? 140 districts use locally grown food in their food service programs in their schools. And so you could tell that Jackie Morgan and the Milton Public Schools food service program is respected by the individuals statewide, the Secretary of Agriculture, the governor were aware of the program. We had Farmer Tim there with us who delivered the vegetables that morning, and every year they ask us to send names of students who work on the farm during the summer. So some of the actual students who worked for community service hours were there and assisted the governor, and it was a very again, we took a lot of pride in the morning. I would share one story with you. Bill Ritchie's going to join us later in the presentation, but I heard that the governor spoke to Bill Ritchie, the head of our consolidated facilities, and commented, about the outstanding facility and how the grounds looked. So all of our work, I personally take pride in. I would tell you a little secret. I feel that every single citizen of this town owns these properties. So just like I'd drive by my own home, my standard is that every one of these schools has to look and be kept up inside and outside, just like your home. And so that the governor mentioned the property, and again, if you don't think that that instills pride in our students, our staff, and our community members, it does. We had a phenomenal turnout for our high school and Pierce School open houses. I actually had school committee members contact me about how positive those nights were and invigorating. And again, when we hire new teachers, we always tell them, this is a school district that you're coming to, that when you call a parent will always return your call. And the percentage of parents and guardians coming to these events is phenomenal. And all you have to do is drive by one of these schools to see. So reminding the public that the Tucker and Cunningham tomorrow night, beginning at 6:30, open houses, and Collycott and Glover open houses will be on September 27th. I want to remind the public that in the celebration of Yom Kippur, there will be no school next Wednesday, September 26th. Circle on your calendar the high school play Hairspray, October 26th and 27th. And Dr. Noreen Diamond Burdette reported that at last week's registration, approximately 150 students signed up for beginner music lessons after school. I wanted to briefly report that we're going to be meeting, citizens in Milton are asked to roll up their excise tax. The acronym for the group is MPACE. They sponsor activities, field trips within the schools in the arts. We're meeting with that group. We met Monday night. We'll meet again Monday night with our finance subcommittee. Our policy subcommittee meets Tuesday. Our health and wellness kickoff meeting will be next Friday morning. I've scheduled a PTO, a monthly PTO meeting of our PTO presidents, and that will be on October 4th. We had a very successful, you're now represented, you were ably represented by school committee member Mary Kelly, and now Becky Padera is representing the school committee at the MFE. We had a very successful meeting last week. Again, circle on your calendar. One of our partners, really thanks to our wellness committee, is the Milton Hospital / Beth Israel Deaconess, and they're having their health walk on September 29th at 10 o'clock. Celebrate Milton. You heard Lori Billowitz here tonight. Sunday, October 7th, we're the host. And very, very poignant day is the MFE Monster Dash in the memory of Sam Cocello, where the MFE raises $10,000 that's given back to science in the elementary schools in Milton. Briefly, on the athletics, boys and girls cross-country teams have a 2-win, 2-loss. Field hockey is also 2-2. Volleyball and girls soccer have records of 2-3. Boys soccer 1-3. Our golf and football are winless with 0-4 respectively, and 0-2. The first crew race will be this Sunday, and individuals who want to check those schedules, they can go to www.highschoolsports.net or our own website to check those schedules. And a reminder to high school parents, the boosters meet on the second Tuesday of every month, and they're looking for huge participation at those meetings.
Where's the crew race, Mary?
Excuse me?
Where's the crew race on Sunday?
The first, Lowell. Not that one.
Okay.
So, thank you. Makes the conclusion of my report.
Just one piece on the MPACE group and the excise tax. In the discussions, what are the drawbacks currently on that? Is that for those people who pay online, their bills, there is no way to add that in. And that probably should be brought up through the treasurer's office, because you can only do the add-on if you actually put a check in the mail. And these days, fewer and fewer people put checks in the mail, and more want to pay online. So we need to look at the town's website for payments to see if we can add that in.
Mr. McAuliffe sits on the committee, so we'll bring that up. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly.
Can I just go back to the enrollment chart? I'm sorry if I...
sorry, I skipped it.
That's okay. I wanted to ask two questions. One is the English classes at Collycott in the 4th grade are now at 26 and 25. Do we approach this from the perspective of capping? I know I hate to bring up that terminology, but when you look at the other, well, actually, yeah, when you look at the other English classes in that grade, in terms of equalizing classrooms, it seems to me that that might be something to...
May I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when when new students arrive to the district, the first thing we do per policy is ask where they live. After they demonstrate residency, we look at the school in which they live, and if there is room in that class, we would put them there. If there was not enough room, which we would use 25 as a number historically, we would then say that they would have to go to the class that we determine, which has the most favorable class size for the children who are already in that class and for the child who's going into that class. There are times where we have families come in with multi-children, i.e. a 1st grader, a 3rd grader, and a 5th grader, and we have to balance the class size of all 3 of those children for one family in an attempt to keep them in one school. So if you see a higher class size, it may be the result that we had a child in 4th grade, 2nd grade, and kindergarten that we were trying to balance the best school for them for all 3 children. So those types of issues would arise, that we may have a class or so that would be higher, and I believe that's what pushed us to 26 at the Collycott. So we wouldn't break up a family for one of the children.
Right, and I understand that, but, you know, one of the things we talk about is class size, so if there's any way possibly to avoid that kind of thing. And then the other thing is that the co-taught at Tucker in the 5th grade has 20 students, and I couldn't remember us having co-taughts that highly enrolled. Is that...
That's true. We historically try to keep it at 18 or below.
Right. Okay, so we just...
Because the students are in the 5th grade, at times attend class for part of the day with other children, that number might not be like that all day. That might be for part of the day. We do 70-30 in the 5th grade, where students are mixed for 70% of the day, and some of the co-taught role models are mixed for part of that day, but those are the students who are assigned to that program.
Okay, thank you.
But to Mrs. Kelly's point, we'll follow back on that 4th grade Collycott. If you look at the English numbers, that is the one class that goes over our existing cap. I'll go and look into that.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for your report? Thank you, Ms. Gormley. Finance Subcommittee report. We have the 4th quarter report, year-end summary.
Is that the only thing on the agenda? Did we cross off the other two, or?
No,
did they stay on?
we crossed out the 3rd, but not the first 2.
Okay.
Bill Ritchie's here.
May I?
Please.
On the 4th quarter report, there was discussion that Mr. Gillis was going to tie out any number. So do we want to look at that Monday morning and move that to the 3rd? I'd feel better about that myself. Is that all right?
I think that's a good idea.
It was back and forth, so we had excellent. So that's moved to Finance Subcommittee on Monday morning. I actually have posted the agenda with that on it for Monday. And then the Milton Public Schools proposal to capital, I think we were going to go, I can hold that.
Unless, again, I feel like I'm losing my mind a lot in this meeting.
Mr. Gillis was going to call to see if he could get another extension.
Yeah, I thought we had a lot of edits to that request, and that we were going to come back around, I think. There was a whole bunch of, questions.
You know, we can...
Mr. Walker, but I think we had questions on that. So I'm unclear as to whether we have a clean document with which to even look at and vote.
Well, I have to say, there aren't many times that we aren't clear and understand one another exactly. And so Mr. Ritchie's here tonight, we can hold that, or we can bring it forward and discuss the capital.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to discuss it with Mr. Ritchie here. I just don't, what document are we working on?
That's the new one that...
Your folder tonight.
Okay.
So, and then the FY14 budget calendar.
Should be
We held that, you took that off.
Right. Mr. Walker was going to correspond with the warrant committee, right, Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
And that's
So
why we held that one.
We'll hold off on fourth quarter, but why don't we,
Yeah, we were going to revise the chart based on our discussion, so make the deletions that we talked about, and we were going to have Bob Patterson and Bill Ritchie talk about the priorities
Okay.
and why they were priorities.
Okay. And Bill Ritchie, Bob Patterson couldn't come, so Bill Ritchie's here tonight. And
come on, Bill.
Mr. Gillis, did you call about an extension?
I did, and
All right.
The revisions that were discussed Monday night at Finance Subcommittee meeting were reflected, and I emailed this as a draft version to the town accountant and said I'd have a more formal recommendation as to whether or not we needed to extend it after tonight's conversation. Didn't want to say the committee wasn't going to feel comfortable proceeding with it before you'd had the chance to review it again, since it was on the agenda. So we can...
Does this reflect the revisions that we made?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So the revisions of this are primarily in the last two sheets, the Excel
Yes.
spreadsheet?
So if I may, there's two Schedule H's. One is the technology and the other one is facilities. And Bill is here tonight to help answer any questions you may have with the facilities Schedule H.
Hey, Bill.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So just to set the framework, this is the 5-year capital expense summary that we're talking about for people who are listening and wondering what we're talking about, that we have to produce annually for the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee. Capital Improvement and Planning Committee has been quasi-dormant for another number of years and is really trying to reinvigorate and try to put together an actual capital plan for the town. I remember seeing very many large, fat capital plans in my time on the warrant committee that just sort of sat there because we never appropriated money for capital.
It was reinvigorated last year.
Yes.
We had a robust capital improvement plan last year.
So this is really getting back to the process we should be looking at of putting together a 5-year plan for this. So, Ms. Kelly.
So I think one of the questions that I came out of that Finance Subcommittee meeting was, has the Capital Planning Committee asked us to differentiate between technology and other? And if so, if not, shouldn't we be prioritizing this entire list to say, here's the top 100, here's the, and all the way down? I guess that's where I was confused, and that's where I appreciate that you're here, Mr. Ritchie, and can answer our questions, but for me as a committee member, that's where I was waiting to get feedback on.
The answer to both of your questions is yes. Yes, they've asked us to differentiate between facilities and technology, and yes, we should prioritize.
So do we prioritize with them together or separately?
Well,
I guess that's my point.
I'd do it, I would prioritize separately first and then together. So, and it looks like we're only going to be able to have half the conversation tonight because Bob Patterson's not here. But I think with the consolidated facilities and Bill's expanded scope, I think we should prioritize the facilities list, but then he's going to have to weigh in from a townwide perspective as well.
Right, and this is where part of our discussion at Finance Subcommittee took out things that we believe probably would be more appropriately coming from the Consolidated Facilities Committee, and what actually still remains in this list is what we believe from the school department perspective is important for us. And so, again, I think it's great that we can have the discussion, have questions and answers from a voting perspective, and I don't know whether we've marked this a vote, and we have. I don't know whether we have an extension to be able to submit this a little bit late. So there's a couple questions to be asked before we can do what we need to.
Well, Mr. Walker and Mr. Gillis, do you know the time frame? I don't want to put you on the spot. And Mr. Gillis has been...
Well, this is the discussion we had at the subcommittee meeting. I think we're close to being out of time. So and given that Bob Patterson's not here, I think we should try to reach closure on the facilities part of the list, and technology is just going to have to wait simply because I'm not prepared to move that forward until I hear from Mr. Patterson.
So what we have here is a 5-year schedule for 14 through 18. And let's stick to the facility side since we have Mr. Ritchie here. It averages roughly $200,000 of capital expenditures per year. A little over, a little less in some years, but almost exactly 200,000 in the average. So, since the subcommittee looked at it, is there anything you want to say about what's on this and what the rationale was for these various different pieces?
So I guess I would defer to the administration on the Brooks Field, because I think they've been doing yeoman's work in terms of trying to figure out how we're going to replace the Brooks Field. So I would ask the administration to just talk about where we're at, and I'm not even sure that we are prepared to talk about.
Yeah, I can talk about that. For Brooks Field, Bill Ritchie, do you want to speak to when that field was installed and the good news story about the repair because of the quality of the beginning field?
Yeah, and maybe just a little history. Obviously, the field was installed in 2002. The life expectancy of a synthetic turf field is 8 to 10 years. 8 years, we actually got 10 years out of the field, and the way we were using it, we should have got 8 years out of it. It depends how many sports you have playing on that. That field's always being used. It's 6 different sports. We've got some prices, and I believe it's already on the capital plan that we submitted last year for $450,000. And obviously, that number could be from 400 to 500 because you really have to put it out to bid, and you should have an architect or an engineer design that field to look at it. What is the best way to replace the top layer? Prices that are coming in right now, about 450 to 500,000.
And would you share the story about that usually 12 years in, people need a new field, but about the quality of the taxpayer's original investment?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, well, obviously, like I said, the field, a synthetic field will last between 8 and 10 years. We've gotten roughly, if we replace it next year, it'll be 11 years, which is extremely good. It's about $1 million to put a field like that today. We're not doing the field over, we're doing the top layer. We have an E-layer, which was very smart, whoever put the E-layer in back then, but it's a rubber cushion. If we did not have that rubber cushion today, there'd probably be a lot more injuries on that field. That's actually what's kind of saving us. The technology today the fields today are much better than they were 10 years ago. Obviously, technology goes up. So I'm hoping when we do the field over, we can get 15 years out of the field. But it really depends on how you use the field. If you use rugby out in that field, and different types of sports, that's why a lot of colleges and facilities are just trying to limit the use. Like the Patriots, only the Patriots play on their field. They're going to get 15 years out of the field. But when you do rugby and soccer and baseball, parties on the field, you're not going to get the 10 years how a field is designed.
So to the point that with that cost, we're looking for alternate sources of funding, going to the capital committee for $100,000 and looking for alternate sources of funding for the balance of what that repair would cost. I'm sorry if I'm repeating what you said. The good news story was they translated it for me, Bill Ritchie, and Steve Tracer, our athletic director, that often after 12 years you have to do a complete replacement of the artificial turf, but because of the quality of the original investment, only that top layer has to be replaced. And when you began with those, it was cutting edge with those kind of turfs.
That's correct, yeah. There's a lot of fields out there today that do not have the E-layer. They have to take the whole field right off. And like I said, there was a lot more injuries. We actually had Steve Tracer was concerned a few years ago about the impact of the student, football. So we brought somebody down to do some compaction tests, and they said we're right at the threshold. Thank God we had that layer. Yeah.
Mr. Gillis?
Yeah, I mean, I think to support Mrs. Gormley's point is, we don't have any drainage problems with the field. We don't have to regrade it. That could be a lot more labor and a lot more cost, and that's something we almost take for granted. But when you hear what the additional cost would be, it could be almost double to repair the field. That's where I think the superintendent is trying to credit the contractor and owner's project manager and Bill with their oversight for doing the project the right way, the way it was designed and constructed, about 10 years ago.
I remember when we were putting it down 10 years ago, we were talking about the replacement cost after 10 years of being roughly $1 million. So this is, a considerable improvement over that. Other pieces in here, I mean, the other piece that runs through it towards the bottom is a phase-in of more security cameras at the various different schools over the next 3 years is probably the other largest chunk of this.
And those prices reflect what we did in 2011 at the high school in Pierce through a similar process with similar equipment, and it covers the interior and exterior of the buildings. We could lower those costs if we just did the exterior, but the value of having the interior is the coming and goings. If somebody gets into the building, if it's somebody we know, the principals can pretty quickly identify who those students are, or who the parents or citizens are, if it's someone that we know, and that works out quite well. And they would tie back into the police department the same way the middle school and high school cameras do, in case that's ever needed in an emergency that hopefully we never need, but it is one of the added security benefits.
So, Mr. Ritchie, as the head of our buildings and grounds and now the head of consolidated facilities, this is your recommendation over the next 5 years, this a snapshot of how you would, your priority is really year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I believe the committee would then ask you to prioritize within those years.
Yeah, and I think what I really have to look at, I mean, I'd like to have 1,000 things on this list. But it's not realistic. I think you have to look at a plan like this, you have to come up with a plan, and every year has to change. Because next year, there might be something else that might break, and I have to take that one, move this one. So I think it's a planning process. I think Matt and I, we started out, we had a lot more things. I better not put that one, I better not put this one. And I'm trying to look at the whole town-wide. I think, it's not the more the merrier, but you want to put everything out there, knowing that there's going to be unforeseeables. And one of the biggest things that we talked about is the ductwork system. I had went to, the capital committee with $680,000. Well, the bids came in roughly about $545, and then another $25,000 to the architect for designing and engineering. But I don't know, out of those 15 ductworks, with 300 feet of ductwork, what's underneath it. Could be $100,000 worth of repairs underneath it, so that's why I try to boost that price up. I think it's great, because when I was sitting there for the bid opening, I put 680, and I didn't want to go back to the town, and ask for more money. The first bid come in at 720. I almost fell off the chair. I said, oh, boy, this is bad, but then the second bid come in at 544. So it's just, we probably picked a good time to do this type of project where the economy is just starting to go up. We probably get a good price, but there's so many unforeseeables, so. But I said, I look at the plan, you put the plan in there, I represent the capital committee, I'm not one of the, I'm a liaison to the committee, but I think you're gonna look at this plan, you're gonna add, you're gonna delete. If they need a new fire truck, that's gonna throw everybody off and have to buy a fire truck. It's just, it's a working plan. It's gonna change year after year, and hopefully with my department, we're gonna have a 20-year plan. We're gonna know exactly when that rooftop unit is gonna die. That's the type of plan you'd like to see, and that's going to be astronomical amount of money, because when I did the feasibility study with DRA, the 22 buildings that I'm overseeing right now, the value is $300 million to replace them. So when we talk about $1 million based on $300 million, it's not really a lot of money. And when you look at the big scope of what we're trying to do here in this department.
Ms. Kelly.
So of the FY14 list, what would be your number 1, 2 in terms of need?
Yeah, well, clearly the field. Yeah, I mean, the field has, has used, it's at the end of its life. And I think it's a safety issue when we have football and everything else, yeah. A major concern.
And then number 2? Is there a number 2 in your prioritization?
Well, I always want to look at roofs. I'm always thought, you know what I mean, I used to be a builder, so I think you have a good foundation, you have to have a good roof. So I think any roofing repair, you know, would be very important.
There's no roofing in
So in
year one.
FY14, we don't have anything
Oh,
in the roof? I guess I'm just looking in the 14 column with the hope that we could at least, if we're to vote this component of it, that the committee could prioritize at least the first 2 for purposes of submission to the capital committee.
Yeah, on this plan, what I think is I'm dealing with the building committee, I might have some leftover money. The Pierce roof is kind of old. It was talked about being replaced before, but we're trying to keep that roof up and existing, but now we have a new roof in our department, so, but
Right, so the way we discussed this at the Finance Subcommittee was that things like roofs, we thought would then fall under your committee's purview.
Yep.
So your request would be to take care of whatever roof, whether it was a school roof or a fire department roof. So I guess what I'm asking is, within the remaining items of which there are only 3, is there something that you would recommend, and maybe, you know, where it's a new item where we haven't had any experience with the cameras, maybe this is our decision to make. But I'm just wondering, I mean, is the Brooksfield track repairs, is that 15,000 something that is, you know, risking?
well, we're actually talking to all the engineers and architects on doing the failover, and we even talked about doing the press box, is another, but, you know, the press box would be a sideline, but when you do a field like that, now's the time to do the track. I tried, to do the track over right now is about $50,000. That's to have it all sprayed, all fixed up, and all relined. If you looked at the track, all the lining needs to be done. But if you're gonna do the field over and have heavy equipment, maybe you do the field, you do the track, and you work your way off the field. Because you might not wanna be going back year after year, patching, you know, so these are things that I'm looking at. So I'm trying to get a price for all, when I bring in an architect out there, I try to look at all give me a price for everything.
So I'm wondering, Ms. Gormley, whether, I mean, it almost sounds like maybe under consolidated facilities, things like the Brooks Field and the track repair should be submitted, and maybe maybe even all the other items, with the exception of the cameras, which are really something new for us. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're still working this plan, because like we said, there's no roof even in our FY14
Right, yep.
listing. And the track, certainly this is the first thing I'm hearing about doing the entire track. I thought maybe there was a patch of the track that needed work.
Well, yeah, that's how it's budgeted out, 15, 15, 50, you know, I mean, if you add up the total, 65,000, we get a number for roughly about 50, but that's doing track repairs year after year.
So would you recommend then that we switch the $15,000 for track repair to reflect the entire track and have that be a second priority? Or I guess I would look to the administration to say, is the cameras a bigger priority from your perspective at this point? I guess I'm just trying to get
Yep.
feedback from you folks as to what you think the prioritization should be before we vote on it and submit it to the capital committee.
Well, I think you can do track repairs with a brand-new field in place. Best case scenario, you do it all at once. You just walk off the field and it's done.
Right.
But I don't know if the capital committee's gonna give us all the money all at once, so I'm just trying to, you try to look
Yeah.
at this and how do you stretch it out?
I can answer that question. They're not.
Well, I'm just, and I think that's why I stretched it out over
Right.
5 years. Yeah. You know, because we did a major repair last year.
So,
Yeah, but it seems here we have 2 large items, the Brooks Field and the security cameras, and 2 smaller items, the track repairs, which is sort of split out over 5 years, and the scrubber
So-
replacement rotation, which is an every year 10,000, which is, in the scheme of capital, I mean, that's the minimum size capital appropriation we can
Right.
talk about. It's almost like really the issue is, there's the 2 big ones, and you try to work the little ones in some sense, you know, it seems to me the priorities are, you know, are the 2 big items, and then, you know, we work with whatever capital is available on the smaller things. I mean, it may be the case that, you know, somehow or other, part of that gets picked up some other way.
Can
Can I
Yes.
just ask a question about the track repairs, though? Are you going to then have to replace the track after spending $15,000 each year to repair it?
No, because if you, a good repair will last you 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
But, usually every 5 years, usually tracks are done over. And what I mean by that, a new coating is applied and all the lines are done. If you look at the lines, it's wear and tear, especially when you're coming, the football players or anybody's coming from the school across the track, it gets extremely worn.
Okay. So that will be, in a sense, the same as repairing it all at once?
That's
is-
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Mr. Ritchie, would you speak to, because you weren't at our finance subcommittee, will you speak to putting the cameras, why you want the cameras on this capital plan?
Well, yeah, I think, having the security cameras at the high school and Pierce Middle School has made enormous difference. Our vandalism has gone down. We can track, we can monitor students. I think it's a great thing. We should have put cameras in a long time ago, but obviously with the money and value engineering, we couldn't. But I think if you look at, no matter where you go today, every time there's a crime, they're going back to the cameras. It's just the life we live in. So I think having cameras, on the outside, I prefer the outside because I want to catch them before they get inside. And that's where your vandalism, like a place like Glover, it's very isolated at night. It's nice to have some type of cameras. School systems are going later at night. So we have a lot of night operations. It's just nice to have that type of security. So I think cameras are just, they may not be as important as a roof, but they're very high up there.
Shirley.
Plus, last summer, we had was it last summer or 2 summers ago, we had the vandalism there at the playground at Glover, so.
That was last summer.
Yeah,
Last summer, so that, that certainly would have helped had we had the cameras at that time.
It was a $50,000, yeah. Thank God we had insurance, but it was a $50,000 repair. Yeah.
So, we have a recommendation.
Well, if we want to prioritize, I'd suggest that I'm comfortable with the $200,000 in expenditures we have here, so we can just vote that. But if you need a prioritized list, then I agree with Mr. Pavlicek. I'd say Brooks Field would be number 1. Cameras at Glover would be Glover would be number 2, and then the other 2 would be 3 and 4, smaller items.
Yeah. I agree with that, yeah.
So was that a motion to submit?
That is a motion.
Second.
To submit this to the Capital Planning and Improvement Committee?
Yes,
with,
it is.
$200,000 expenditure in year
And we will
1 with those priorities.
We'll have more discussion on the out years and provide that information as soon as possible.
Question?
Yes.
Are we saying that we want them to be in this order?
Not
Or
necessarily.
are we just saying we
I-
want 200,000, we
That's
approve
what I
that?
would prefer to say.
Okay.
But we're also giving direction to our representative on the Capital Planning
Right.
Improvement Committee to
Got it, versus a vote.
indicate our preferences as to how lacking $200,000 we would prioritize. Ms. Kelly?
So then, should we then remove the entire spreadsheet with the the direction to Mr. Walker to prioritize as we've discussed, if possible?
Even better.
So no additional revisions are needed to the
I will
entire
accept
sheet?
that as a friendly amendment.
So we would move so the motion would be to recommend the entire 5-year plan to the Capital Planning Improvement Committee and to give some direction to Mr. Walker on the lines of the priorities for the first year at least. And with the obvious understanding that we're going to come back and talk about years 2, 3, and 4, and 5 every year. I mean, this
Right.
is,
Yeah.
the most important vote is on year 1 at this point because that's going into the process at this point, but it gives them something to put in their 5-year plan that at this moment, this is how we see 5 years out.
Yes.
So that was moved by Mr. Walker.
Second.
It was seconded by Ms. Kelly. Is there any further discussion on this portion of our capital planning submission? Hearing none, all those in favor? That is unanimous. And we have the second part we will have to deal with when Mr. Patterson is here to talk about technology, unless there is something people would like to say about it now, just to put questions on the table so we can direct them to him.
I would just urge the administration to convey to Mr. Patterson the urgency that we have, and that without input from him, we're not going to submit the technology portion, which would be a significant problem for our school system. So
Sure.
hopefully he can be available.
So I was going
At our
to
next meeting.
ask that question. If we're on a timeline and we have, and we haven't voted this piece of it, the technology piece, does that mean that this won't be considered until we vote it at our next meeting, which is October 3rd? Is that, if that's past the deadline, does that mean we won't get any of these capital expenses?
I'll certainly indicate that there's a technology request that's coming, but we had asked Mr. Patterson to be here this evening, and apparently he was not able to. So I'll certainly make it clear that we have a request, and I'll let them know the approximate amount, but it needs some discussion, and we haven't had any with him.
I guess I'd just like to say that the network and the wireless upgrades, are imperative in terms of keeping up with the technology that's in our schools, and so he should be here to speak to that, but...
Well, he should, and we have some significant questions about the priorities themselves and how he arrived at the things that are on the list and some things that we think possibly should be on the list that aren't on the list, so there's a fair amount of discussion that needs to go on. He wasn't at the Finance Subcommittee meeting, and we haven't seen him, so...
Okay, so we will defer this.
Show up.
Yes.
So the other component, though, will be forwarded to the capital committee? Is that the way we're handling this?
I was going to say, but then when Ms. Sheridan spoke, it's probably better the full committee. I was going, when Mr. Gillis asked, Mr. Patterson couldn't come tonight, I was going to say, should I try to get him Monday morning for finance? But I think it's probably, hearing the discussion, more advantageous for the full committee.
Absolutely.
Fine.
Unless he wants to do both,
Right.
which might be a good thing to do.
We will do both.
All right. So that would finish our item on the capital plan for this evening. We have anything else under Finance Subcommittee? We put off the fiscal 14 budget timeline off the agenda.
Right, just to tell you that we are working on the budget calendar, but we'll hopefully have it for you next time, as well as the other reports. And we also have the end-of-year report coming as well.
That will be on the October 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you for having me, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie.
Night, Bill.
That was a great story about the governor.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised because he actually walked right by me. Jackie said, "That's the facility director." "Oh, it is." He turned around. I felt like, oh, I got to turn around again, But it's great. But that was, everyone worked really hard. It was a great time for the governor and everybody else, to kind of show off our flagship.
And I heard he complimented the facilities as well.
Right. That's what Mary was saying earlier.
Thanks. Take care, Bill.
All right. Well, on to my report. You have a couple of attachments of data that was requested at prior meetings. One is the enrollment data broken up in a few different ways. First, full grade at a time, percentage of male, non-white, 504 ELL, low income, and so forth. And then at the elementary level, broken out by English, French, and co-taught grade by grade. That's the lower chart. We went through and had to excise data where the raw data indicated fewer than 3 or fewer students. We decided that was the best cutoff place to remove it. So in the columns where you see the triple asterisk, the data was, in a sense, too low to report. Because it gave you the opportunity, even if you put percentage on something, given the approximate size of those classes, once you disaggregate by grade and by English, French, or co-taught, you could tell how many students there were, and it ran open the possibility that our council had suggested we should avoid, of being able to actually identify a student. The one thing that the line of triple asterisks do is to show you that, for instance, in the category of students with 504s, there aren't very many of them in any of these disaggregated groups. I mean, it's a small clientele compared to the IEP, which is, in itself is a piece of information that I don't think all of us were aware of, exactly how few 504 plans there are versus IEP plans. So there's a variety of different things in here. You'll have some time to look over it. You've just received it. There's, some of the data is data that probably we would have you would have expected to see. We've heard that, for instance, there are more males in English than there are in French, and that bears out in many grades. Interestingly, not in first grade, where the percentage of males is the same in the English and the French this year. There's some surprises in here to take a little time to dig through and look at. There are other things that people say, oh, yeah, I knew that. So it was quite a lot of work by John Phelan, Sean Walsh, and others putting this together, because it had to be drawn from a variety of different places, and much of it documented manually. So that's one piece for you to take a look at. Second piece is the memo on other National Immersion Program data, which we're just seeing for the first, I'm just seeing for the first time tonight.
Do you want John to speak
You want
to
to
it?
say a couple words to it, John?
Sure. Dr. Fisher had, at the committee's request, from one of our last presentations over the summer, was asked to research how many school districts offered an immersion program throughout the whole country, and was there a capping process utilized by those districts. So she contacted the Directory of Foreign Language Immersion Programs in U.S. Schools at the Center for Applied Linguistics. I provided you with this memo to give you some data, and then also provided some of her reach out to existing communities that she was able to contact. So first and foremost, there are, not to read to you, but for the public, there are 38 states that have immersion programs, according to the Center for Applied Linguistics in 2011. There are 448 total schools that offer immersion programs, 79 of which are private schools, and there are 151 school districts that offer, and that should just be immersion programs, not French, it could be another language. So that's the general data, or the landscape that we would work from. With that number of districts and those number of schools being plentiful, Dr. Fisher began to research which districts and schools she should contact. What is attached to this memo is a list of those districts in the state in which they reside. She was reaching out to districts that had similar characteristics, in the sense that they have had an immersion program for a period of time with some longevity, that they had immersion programming, and were also had faced or are facing some programmatic challenges, like how to assign students. The 7 districts that she chose all had a capping mechanism for their enrollment. And due to the school size, the district size, and other variables that were unique to their districts, they all had different aspects of their capping model that involved preference, transportation, eligibility of students, and waitlist options. So if you look on page 2, she researched the district in Milwaukee, Fairfax, Virginia, Lafayette Parish, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Bellevue, Washington, Minneapolis Public Schools in Minnesota, and Berkeley Public Schools in California, all of which have a history with immersion programs, and all of which she felt relatively corresponded with some of the challenges that we have here in Milton with a program that's over 25 years old. So the data had to be done with personal phone call. It was not able to be done via the internet. Some of these internet documents were 50 pages long and did not cull the information in a way in which fit into the categories that we would want to be able to compare to. So we felt the most important questions to ask were the ones that were asked by the committee, which were how many districts do this across the country, and do they cap? She did provide some extraneous information regarding transportation preferences, et cetera, that are on the sheet provided to you. This work She reached out to about 20 to 30 districts, but after speaking with them and sensing that their situations weren't similar to Milton's, this is how she came about with these 7 districts. This was hours and hours of handwork on the internet and calling districts and contacting superintendent's offices, as well as contacting the Center for Applied Linguistics as well. So this is data that you had asked for in somewhat of the detail that was requested.
The other piece, in a sense, possibly the most important piece of this tonight, is this proposed timeline for working with this. Basically, much of it is historical, but I think the important part of the last couple bullets here, that in October, and I think we're thinking earlier in October rather than later because we've been talking about this, that the superintendent will present her, as she put them here, capping implication scenarios, with the idea that we would have a meeting or 2 or 3 to talk about it, but the idea of getting a vote certainly in November to, at the latest, the beginning of December, as to what these are. There have been a lot of discussion. We've had a lot of input from people. We've all received many emails, many correspondence, and so forth. There have been meetings in the district. I know I've been talking with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent. Other folks have too. We have a leadership meeting coming up to talk about this as well. And you can see from even just the data that was just distributed, there are lots of implications here. I mean, if you are going to, for instance, do a lottery on a district-wide basis, versus a school-wide basis. I mean, if you take a lottery on a school basis, then are you saying that the 3-unit schools, only 1 in 3 children possibly might be taking French immersion, where in the 4-unit schools, 2 in 4 children might have the opportunity because of the number of classrooms? If you do it on a district-wide basis, what are the implications there in terms of, if people select one program or another and too many people put one? We've always said that, for instance, you always had the guarantee that you would either have your program or your home school. Well, it's easy to see a scenario now where, a large number of people go for one program, there aren't enough to get into it, but by the time you back out, there aren't enough seats in the English program in that school, and so you might have some people getting neither their program nor their school. And I mean, that's easily possible given the situations. We have to work out how we deal with all those different things. People have asked questions about sibling preference, and all that sort of thing we have to deal with. I mean, sibling preference was introduced to keep children in the same school as much as possible when we first introduced it. It wasn't necessarily to keep children in the same program. We are now talking about a lottery for a different purpose. So all of those things have to be on the table, and there are just an enormous number of scenarios to play out. So this is not going to, it's going to take some work on the part of the administration and talking with the leadership team to try to put together something that addresses all these different issues. I mean, we're at a position, where some people are suggesting we don't do anything, but we just let the STEM program down. Well, we've had issues this year. I mean, we've managed to deal with parental preference in the past, and everything has more or less worked out the way we needed to. This year, we ran into some issues. And if it is better to have a plan and not need it than to need a plan and not have it. So I think we need to, we've been burned once. We need to have a fallback where we can say, well, if it happens again, this is what we're going to do. And we need to be ready for these sorts of things. So the point of this was to really try to lay out that we hope to have a plan to present within the next school committee meeting, or plans to present within the next school committee meeting or 2, with the goal of us having voted out something by November, or certainly the 1st of December at the latest. And that's really what I'm putting out here for discussion, is that sort of a timeline. Whether we think it's reasonable, but I think it's probably imperative that we make it reasonable. Ms. Kelly.
So would the administration be ready to present options for the next school committee meeting?
Yes.
So at least
their
two
intent.
options?
Two.
At least two, or?
At least two.
Maybe more than two, okay. And, you know, once the options are presented, it seems to me that we would want to have maybe some forums to hear feedback from the community. And I guess I would rather try scheduling those, you know, start thinking about those now and get them into a schedule. I would prefer to be voting on this before December. I would love to be able to, by Thanksgiving, to have this settled in terms of how we're moving forward. So
I
would
think
the
that was the
committee
point.
be open to trying to set up some meetings right now? Or do we even think that we need to have separate forums? Or should it just be that people come to school committee meetings and express their opinions? Or how are we going to approach that?
My suggestion would be, our meetings have, as we, at 10:15 tonight, 3¼ hours in, and not to the superintendent's evaluation yet, are rather full at this time of year. I'm not going to cut anyone off of citizen speak, but I think we need to have, you know, if we're going to invite people in to talk about this, I think we need to set aside some time to do it. I don't think we can do it in the context of our I mean, certainly we're not going to tell them they can't come to citizen speak and talk about it.
Right.
But the question is whether 30 minutes at the beginning of a meeting and 30 minutes at the end of a meeting will suffice. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe we'll come up with such a wonderful plan that everyone will say, yeah, that's it. Or maybe people will have opinions. I think we're just going to have to work that through. I think we'll get probably after we'll get some initial reaction once things are presented. And I think the fact that the administration is committed to presenting at least two, we will have people weighing in with their preference. So I think we're pretty much guaranteed to get a response. Even if it's only, I like both of them, but I like this better. And that's fine. I don't know that we need to set up 3-hour weekly meetings for anyone to come in, but I mean, probably at least one meeting set aside, you know, maybe in between two of our other ones to basically designate as an open forum on it might not be a bad idea. Anyone else have an opinion on that? Mr. Walker?
I think this has gone on much too long. I think that we owe this Milton school community a vote. I would hope that we could vote on October 3rd. We went from, and the timeline's a little misleading because it says in June the superintendent recommended capping, and that wasn't a recommendation that was in any condition for us to vote on, so it's a little misleading. But we've heard various perspectives from parents. We've heard from other parts of the community. I think we've asked for specificity on the actual proposal. I think that's the one thing we have to have that we don't have yet. But I think November or December is much too late. I think we should make every effort to digest, discuss, and vote on the proposal on the 3rd. And if we haven't done that, then wipe the October 17th agenda clean, except for the superintendent's evaluation, and vote at that meeting. I just think if we don't have the information we need, we should get it, but this has gone on too long. I think we're doing everyone a disservice at this point.
Anyone else? Ms. Bagley-Jones?
I guess I would ask, I mean, I agree with you, and I mean, it's always important to have people communicate with us and us to communicate and hear from them, so they can continue to use the regular channels,
Yeah.
which is citizen speak, emails to all of us, which we've all been getting,
Which they're
emails
using
and
quite
phone calls.
frequently, yeah.
And that's great, people should be reaching out to us, that's what we should be doing and listening to them. I guess I would think, Mary and John, I don't know when you can have the two proposals ready, because if people had a chance to look at them ahead of time, in other words, I don't want a scenario of from now until December 15th, we have 30 people coming and speaking to us each week about something we haven't even looked at yet. Like, let's look at something that the two proposals you're coming up
I think we should be
with.
transparent. I mean,
Right.
we should see it. The Milton
But
Schools
my
Committee
point
should
is
see
that
but-
if it just continues, we're going to keep raising everybody's anxiety. So if we can
Exactly.
get two concrete proposals sooner than later for people to digest and give us feedback in the normal ways, I don't know if we really need to have a meeting where we explain it again, if we get the information to them sooner than later. If we can't, then I think we need more
If
communication.
we don't know what all the questions or concerns are at this point, then we're not listening.
I think the issue is once you get the details of a plan,
Right. That's what-
someone could say, well, what if, you know, my situation is X, and what if this occurred, how would this plan deal with it? And as much as, you know, we're all immersed in this, no pun intended, there are scenarios that the administration and the leadership team and all of us sitting around this table are just going to say, oh, I didn't think of that. And to the extent that that sort of stuff comes out from discussion, I think it's good. I don't think that takes 12 meetings in 18 hours, but I think it requires an opportunity for people to say, well, you know, what would happen if this happened? And I think, you know, at least give them people an opportunity to ask that, whether it's in citizen speak or a separate meeting. I could live either way. But I just think we need to make sure we let people say, you know, I saw that, and I said, did you think about this scenario? And I think the more did you think about we hear, we refine it and get it that much better. I mean, because there's always going to be something we never thought about. You know, what if I had, you know, twins with this, and, you know, just, you know, this, that every kind of a scenario. But, you know.
And some of that, though, I think can be answered when we do the first grade nights, because a lot of people ask those types of questions. We'll think through everything, and maybe it's still some things might come up that we hadn't thought of, and, you know, the administration, I would assume, would work hard to answer those questions. But, yeah, I would agree that we need to just give people an answer. I think people are having some sleepless nights on both sides, on all sides of the situation, and, you know, in a obviously a well-thought-out, timely manner, well thought out, but at the same time, you know, waiting till December, I think, is way too long for people.
And I did watch, this is quick, I did watch our September 5th meeting, but it's not clear to me why we think now we need more than one scenario, which complicates it further. Why wouldn't we just ask for the superintendent's best recommendation with as much detail as possible and discuss that? Why do we think we need multiple scenarios? I watched the discussion, but I'm still not clear on how we went from give us a recommendation to give us 2 or 3 scenarios.
Well, if I might, I have worked with central office and part of the leadership team on one plan, and been working to perfect that plan. Responding to the school committee, I could work on a second plan. Right now, in the spirit of being completely honest, I have one plan.
And that's what I
Well, why
want
don't
to
you
hear.
give us that? And whatever questions come out of that, great. But if you have 2 plans, then they're going to be 2 sets of questions and possibilities and concerns. Give us your best plan.
Ms. Kelly.
I think that's fine. I guess I would ask, what is that plan intended to do? Because I think that we always keep going around this.
Right.
I think if we think it is that too many people are choosing one program over another, I think we're totally missing the point. What the data that is presented here, and granted, it's only grades at a time, it does not go into the details of individual classrooms, is very clearly indicating to us is that we have a system that from a classroom perspective is totally unbalanced. And all that we hear from education, you know, the data, is that we need to have balance. Every other district who doesn't have parental choice in terms of what track they take painstaking time to look at every child and their needs and to differentiate and to make up classrooms that have a good demographics and have equal class size. If you look at our enrollment chart, the discrepancy in some of those grades it's like a different educational environment. And so the challenge for the Milton Public Schools administration is to figure out a system that still allows choice, although I would still articulate, I think we do disservice to all of our kids in that we have that choice at such an early grade. I truly believe that we should have no language immersion at all until after 2nd grade, when all students have a great base with which to, for them and their parents to make choices about what foreign language they would like to be immersed in going forward. But that being said, I know I'm not going to win that battle. I think that we owe it to every single student, for those gap students that were talked about earlier in this evening's meeting, to make classrooms that are well-balanced. And that takes a lot. Not only does it take, I think, limiting how many students or how many classrooms of French we will have, but also go down even deeper and say, what does that classroom need to look at to provide for balance in the other side? And I think that's quite a challenge. And, you know, I hope that the administration will go to that level, because ultimately that's what this system needs. Absent us saying we're going to give everybody a great sound foundation, we need to do something like that in how we create this assignment policy.
I couldn't agree more. And to go one step further, we want roughly equivalent results in terms of performance on the other end. So we don't want disparate. Not only do we want balance on the front end, we want equivalent performance on the back end. But I think they're sensitive to those things.
You know, just hearing and reading what's been going on in the community, I'm not sure that everyone understands really what the issue is. And I think that's why it makes sense for us to re-articulate what is the challenge for the Milton Public Schools.
Absolutely.
And it really is that for all these many years, our system has been driven by parents making the choices and not the educators. And because of that,
That's not, I don't think that's fair. I think that we have, you know, this is largely a success story. We've created a program that's so popular that a lot of people want it. But what we didn't anticipate, and this is a relatively recent development, what we didn't anticipate is the impacts that it would begin to have at a certain level of demand on other parts of our program.
and, you know, Mr. Walker... sorry.
But I don't think that I don't think it's fair to say that was parent-driven. I think that the leadership team made some choices about what the right programs were to offer, and they did their best on that, and in the last year or two, we've determined that needs a harder look.
And I appreciate you saying this, but I have been sitting here for 10 years. And for 10 years and earlier than that, we have had this disparity. And because we haven't addressed it, it has gotten to this crisis point, which, you know, we need to deal with. But I guess my perspective is that, again, because we have parents choosing, instead of educators creating very balanced classrooms with which all of our teachers can contribute and all children will thrive, we are where we are. And I think it requires a very different perspective in terms of how we do assignment going forward.
This is my closing comment, but first let me compliment you on 10 years. That's quite a credential. But how do we know that this has existed for 10 years when I thought this was the first deep dive we did on demographics?
No, unfortunately, when we did the student assignment plan way back, I don't know how many years ago, we deep dived then. All the data was there. It was saying the same things, but we chose not to deal with it.
Really?
And there's also been previous reporting on the differentiation between how different programs were performing and what the makeup was. So unfortunately, it has been.
This is a little distressing.
Well,
you were saying that we identified these performance gaps and achievement gaps and chose to ignore them?
I wouldn't say we chose to ignore them. We just didn't choose to deal with that issue at that time.
Well,
so you could say we ignored them.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say. Okay. I wasn't
And again,
here.
this is my perspective. Yeah. I was sitting through all of them, so.
Okay. Can I suggest we defer the superintendent's evaluation to the next meeting, because it's 10:30 and...
Can I ask a question directed towards Mary and John? On the thing that Dr. Fisher gave us, I can tell I'm getting tired, on the piece of paper here.
Exactly.
Comments, it says 2 enrollment periods, IEP committee approval, screening is a minimum score on school readiness test, grades 1 through 5 admission model. I would be curious as to how those features are used in those programs, because we don't do any of those. And you don't have to tell me now, and I'm just saying whatever your proposal is, it would, because that is pre-testing kids on some of them, that is special needs being looked at, that is two enrollment periods, what age, to speak to Ms. Kelly's point, is it all grade one, is it, whatever. I would be curious, there's a little more data on that in your proposal.
Yes, 'cause some of those would involve doing things like pre-testing children, qualifying them to get into different programs.
No, I'm just saying on here, what do they mean by this? So, 'cause we don't do any of this, so I'm just curious, I don't know what two enrollment periods means.
I think that as Dr. Fisher could speak to it better than I, but each district was so unique in what they were offering for their language program choice that they all didn't line up perfectly. She was trying to provide some generic comments that there was a vast amount of characteristics to the plans that they
Right.
used in a range of different things that
So-
they used to implement as part of the process that we
Right.
may or may not want
Right.
to entertain,
Right, but
given
what
who
I'm
we are in
saying,
Milton.
I don't mean to interrupt you, John, what I'm saying is that I've always wondered why we don't have more than one enrollment period, and I've always wondered why we don't do some kind of pre-readiness test. So I'd like more data about those two items, because we don't do those. So why are they doing them and we're not? And maybe she can't answer that question, maybe it's too, I don't want to take more time. I'm just saying, I've always wondered why we don't do those two things. And now other districts are, so why aren't we? I would just be curious about your feedback on that.
Okay.
Anything else on this? On the elementary program, Ms. Kelly?
Just so, have we established a timeline that is definitive that we can present to the community so that everyone's on board?
The administration has said they intend to get us something at our next meeting.
A
Correct.
plan, a single plan.
A plan,
Yes.
right? And then the anticipation is our next meeting, we will vote? Is that what I'm hearing
That's
Mr.
my
Walker
hope.
suggest?
So we're
October
getting the
3rd.
plan, and then we're voting the same night?
No, the meeting after
That's what I'm
that.
asking. So we're getting the plan, and then in 2 weeks, we're voting after the plan.
So
Right.
the 3rd and the 17th.
And the question I would ask,
Wonderful goal.
If it was crystal clear and we all were in agreement, we could possibly vote, but the likely outcome is we'll vote the following meeting.
I'm more worried about the community having a chance to give input. So
No,
let's be
right.
clear.
So-
We're getting it October, whatever. Everybody's going to have a chance to adjust it, and then we're going to have the final vote 2 weeks later, or we're not. But I want people to know. Are they going to have a chance to digest it before we vote on
I
it?
think the
And
most important
they
thing is
should.
you're saying that we're not going to get it presented and vote the same night without
Right.
people having a chance to get input.
That's
I think
right.
is what you're asking.
No.
Otherwise, we need it given to us
But-
now and to them now.
But it depends on when this plan is ready. Because if we can
That's right.
distribute it before the meeting, a week before the meeting,
But that's why I'm asking.
yes.
What is the distribution plan?
A
And I
week
don't
before
want
the
to-
meeting is only a week
I
from
know.
today.
I don't think
Then-
that's when you get it. No, Mary, we need, don't just say, well, don't put yourself through that you'll get it to us in a week. That's not
She
fair to
said she's
you.
been working on it.
Well, she's been working on it, but she hasn't met with the entire administration team yet.
Right.
I'm not
Jill
going to put her
has
the, I mean, I'll
So
be
you'll
very
just-
happy to see it at
So
our next
we-
meeting.
You'll have the
we
plan
do-
next
We do
Thursday.
agree that
I will be very happy to have it at our
needs to
next
get out to the Milton School
Yes.
Committee within a reasonable amount of time
Yes.
so that they can study it, comment, ask questions, raise
That's right.
concerns before we vote.
Yes.
If by chance the superintendent can get it ready quickly and, but the, Mary?
I'm sorry, I think we owe it to the public to establish a timeline and abide by it. So if we believe that Ms. Gormley should have it out next week, and then we're going to vote it on whatever the next meeting is, then we should establish that.
Okay, I
Otherwise,
agree.
we should establish the different timeline, please.
I agree.
I don't think it's fair.
So,
Mrs. Sure.
Ms. Gormley?
You'll have the plan next Thursday or Friday, definitely.
Sure.
Thursday.
I would like to suggest that we vote, that we hear the plan on October 3rd and vote on the 17th. We have a lot of things on our agenda that we have to do, on those dates that have to be done in a timely fashion. So to put all of that in one meeting is a lot. So
Most
I
of
would-
which are less important than this.
I'm not talking about priorities, I'm talking about
I'm
things that
talking-
have to.
Well, we have MCAS that will be released at that point.
We have a diversity report that needs to be.
And that's required by
Right, there are
timeline.
required things.
And we have the superintendent's evaluation.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we do have some things on the 3rd, but we can work this into it, I am sure. I'm just not sure we're going to work our way all the way through to a vote in one night.
Right.
I think it makes more sense to say 2 meetings. One to get it, some time to think about it, vote at the next meeting. Just to
so people know what the timeline is. Ms. Kelly?
And the only question I have is, should we have something in the middle week there that allows people to come, express their opinions, raise questions, so that we're informed? This is really the procedure that we have utilized in the past, and I can appreciate Mr. Walker's frustration with us not being further along, but it's a cultural thing, I think, and we're getting there. But the fact that we establish a timeline that has presentation of the recommendation, I would encourage, and maybe the administration might be available, and I'll gladly attend to whatever, a meeting in the week in between, and then a vote in the following week.
I think there's no reason not to look at that. I mean, we can hold it now and make the decision on the 3rd when we see the plan, when we see what it is, whether we think we need that middle meeting, but I would say for this point, people might want to hold that time. Because that's when I think you're right, it's when it likely would be is the Wednesday night in between, because we know we can do Wednesday nights.
Right.
So, and maybe
We'll hold that night.
We'll hold the night, and when we see the plan on the 3rd, we'll decide whether we feel we need the meeting on the 10th or not.
Sounds great.
Revised school committee calendar, you have it, and we just revised it again. Let's move on. The superintendent's evaluation. Mr. Walker, you were suggesting we move that off to the 3rd.
I am.
Second.
All right. Is there any objection to doing that, committee?
Can you just tell us what was moved on this? What was changed on the agenda?
Well, just the 10th, the 3rd, the 10th, and possibly the 10th and the 17th.
No, I know what we talked about tonight, previously, prior to tonight. I didn't have the other copy.
I'll email it out to everyone and have Ms. Roach highlight everything that was changed.
I mean, I can look at my former copy, but I just didn't know if there was anything for the next meeting that was
I don't think
glaring.
there was, I think it was just, might have been tonight that was amended. I'll have to take a look myself.
I'll check that, sorry.
All right, so we'll put the strategic plan off until next, I'm sorry, the superintendent's evaluation off until 10/3. What about the strategic plan? We had a consultant in to talk on Monday night, but unfortunately I was teaching, so I wasn't able to be there. So I don't know where we sit on that at the moment.
I think we discussed in Finance Subcommittee that we're going to discuss it again in Finance Subcommittee, and I'm going to make calls to arrange for individuals to come in who, to talk to us.
Okay.
So that's on the Finance
So we'll
Subcommittee
move that
agenda
to-
for Monday morning.
The ductwork bid, we do have to vote to take this. This is the, Mr. Ritchie alluded to it when he was here earlier. This is the ductwork on the roof of this building. This was money that was appropriated at town meeting last spring. The bids were opened, and as Mr. Ritchie indicated, they came in well within the parameters of the amount of money that was authorized for it. Since it is a contract between us and the low bidder, I would need a motion to authorize me to sign the contract on behalf of the school committee.
So move.
Second.
Matt, do you want to say anything to the bid or the bid process?
No, the only difference between this and the Glover Pierce bid was that we hired an architect to put out the bid specs. It was a much larger project, and voting it tonight and signing the contract, we can send off the notice to proceed and get some of the work started in the fall. They might be able to get about 1/3 of it done before the snow flies, and then finish it in the spring, so we could finish this up in this fiscal year.
Ms. Kelly?
I'm sorry, what was the motion?
So it would be to authorize me to sign the contract on behalf of
The contract with whom?
Cooling and Heating Specialists Incorporated.
Of Newton, Mass. for a dollar amount of?
$544,007.
My point is, it needs to be part of the motion. I'm sorry, but that's what.
I'm looking at it, I just didn't say it
Sorry.
out loud.
All right, so the motion would be to authorize the chair to sign contract on behalf of the school committee with Cooling and Heating Specialist Incorporated of Newton.
Second again.
In the amount of $544,007. Any other discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Citizen speak, topic response. Not hearing any. Next meeting agenda items. I think we just put some on, but Mary.
Right, I don't have an agenda item, but I would appreciate the policy subcommittee to review our school committee agenda policy to see whether putting a vote next to an agenda item is required as part of that policy. And if it is not there, then I would request that we put it there, so that expectations of both the public when they see our agenda and the membership could be understood clearly.
All right. Any other on future meeting agenda items? Citizen speak? I don't have a sign-in sheet, but if you'll give your name.
I didn't sign in.
That's right.
Peter Culhane, 464 Central Avenue. Unless I'm completely forgettable, you might recall I appeared here last in July to talk about the French immersion program. But I've had a chance to listen to a whole lot of other things that are completely unconnected to that. I'll make a couple of brief observations about the first long discussion about the teachers' collaborative. I listened to Ms. Bagley-Jones, and she made a lot of good points. It's a great inconvenience for parents, particularly with two parents working in most cases, to have either a late start or an early release. And it occurs to me there are a couple of possibilities that didn't get brought up by anybody. Some nights students have more homework than others. They have to work a little bit longer. Every night teachers have homework. Why not just start this at about 2:30 when school ends and go on to 5:30 or 6? Let the teachers put in the time. I don't know whether the union representative who was here earlier would jump to sign something tomorrow morning to that effect, but that's one possibility of solving the problem without diminishing the amount of school hours that students have before their teachers. The other, do an early release and throw a big party in the gym for the high school and the middle school students until normal release time, and do something on a little lesser scale for the elementary school students. I say that not entirely tongue-in-cheek. It's a possibility. As far as the capital expenditures, I would think that the lights to deal with vandalism would be the least useful way to spend the money. The problem with the vandalism is it's typically done by teenagers, and the cameras help you catch them after the fact. And when they are caught and brought before the criminal justice system, nothing ever happens. They get a slap on the wrist. If anything really major is going on, long time, 3-4 hour rampage over at the Glover, somebody in the neighborhood will call the police. And it's not likely to catch any of those kids anyway. But I came to talk about the French immersion program. And I strongly endorse the idea of having a meeting on the 2nd or the 3rd, and then give the parents at least 2 weeks to respond to Superintendent Gormley's plan. She stated unequivocally she had 2 plans, but when pressed, she has 1. And it's safe to assume that that plan involves a cap on a lottery. I listened to every speaker in July, everybody at these tables, and everyone from the audience, and I was just yearning to hear one person tell me something that nobody told me. It reminds me of the old fairy tale, the Emperor's New Clothes. So I'm going to be the little boy who points out something that nobody said. Not one person in this room stated a single significant advantage of the English-only program that is absent from the French program. Not one. If there is no special characteristic in a program, in a town where you have 2 academic programs, then there's no reason to have 2 academic programs. You need 1 program. And what you need is to choose is the superior program. And the French program, based on the data, is the superior program. You have the data produced by Dr. O'Dwyer. You have the data that was distributed by one of the parents of all the studies that have shown that the immersion process itself accounts for the outperformance academically of the French immersion students over the English students. There's just no getting around the simple fact. French immersion students perform better academically than English-only students. And the best way to improve the performance of the minority students and the low-income students, and I'd really like to know how many low-income students can possibly exist in Milton, according to what the government statistics say constitutes low income. There's no rental apartments in this town. There are high-end condos. There's a half of a duplex. How can a low-income person live here? Perhaps someone who's laid off is now low income, but it just strikes me as curious. But if you want to improve the academic performance of minority students and low-income students, put them in the French immersion program. And in any program, whether it be the English-only program or the French immersion program, you have a continuum of students. You have the elite, the top. You have the better students. You have the average students. You have the poor students. You have the fair students. You have the poor students. That's true in both programs. There are plenty of students in the English-only program who are academically superior to students in the French immersion program. But what can we say about the brightest of the bright students in the English-only program? The only conclusion you can draw from the data is that if that student had been in the French immersion program, she would have shined even brighter. And what can you say about all of the students in the English-only program? Move them over to the French immersion program, and they'll all perform at least a little bit better. Again, some students will perform in French better than others, just as some people perform in math better than others. There's no need to maintain a program that doesn't provide the students with anything that the French immersion program does. And I think it's really interesting that after that meeting, the school department or the school committee, or both of you together, I'm not sure which, took what I can only call hasty action to revise the curriculum in the English-only program. It happened in a matter of weeks. One person at this meeting mentioned STEM, and now all of a sudden STEM is being introduced this year, this month. What kind of preparation went into that? What kind of thought went into it? And let's take the acronym STEM: Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. Well, science, we have science. Math, we have math. Technology, it's starting to sound a little gimmicky to me. I don't know much about the STEM program, but kids today have technology before they enter kindergarten. Engineering, that's almost laughable. You want to do some serious engineering, master calculus first. Lego blocks is not engineering. But I could be wrong about that program. In fact, I don't know that the program is a gimmick. All I know is it didn't change the curriculum, it was integrated into the curriculum for 45 minutes a week. And I don't know how much can be accomplished in 45 minutes a week. But if that program has merit, if it really will help these children to excel in the future in technology and engineering and math and science, then why should it be denied to the French immersion program? It would be just as easy to integrate it into the French immersion program as it is to introduce it into the English-only program. The purpose of introducing STEM clearly was to get more people to vote for English. You heard them time after time, 6 or 7 parents saying, give us something in the English-only program so that more parents will choose it. And I suggest that was a hasty reaction. And I'll make a couple of more points.
Well, actually, we tried to limit to 3 minutes, so.
Okay. You were much more generous last time, but you were to everybody.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there, and I, again, urge that you give the parents, many of whom are far more eloquent than I, an opportunity to come in here between the time Superintendent Gormley, for whom I have great respect, maybe the most energetic superintendent we've ever had, and for Mr. Phelan, who I believe is destined to be superintendent of schools someday after she's done her job. But there's just, give us a reason to maintain the English-only program. You haven't done it. You just haven't done it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vitti.
In response to that testimony, I have a daughter with an intellectual disability. She isn't going to be the highest achiever person in this school district in French or in English, but she's as important of a student and a human being as anybody else, period. She walks, she talks, she learns, she laughs, and it's in great part because of the services and the programs and the supports we get from the Milton Public Schools, and the co-taught in particular. That previous testimony is exclusionary, it's elitist, it's segregationist, and that's at best. We started this meeting by reciting the words, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice delayed is justice denied. Vote for justice for all and support the CAP. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. My name is Adrienne Sullivan. I live at 40 Sherrill Drive. And I just would like to point out that this is, in fact, democracy in action. This is a representative democracy. And it's actually a wonderful opportunity to speak in terms of acknowledging the process that the school committee goes through, the process that the administration goes through. And I would just like to, after sitting in the audience these many hours, it could be 1 in the morning, but we have a high school, we have a middle school, and we have an elementary environment that is absolutely fantastic. We have teachers that are committed, we have an administration that's committed, and we have a school committee that sits and listens and deliberates and steps up to the plate. And so at this point, hopefully, the deliberation can and will come to a conclusion. But just keep that in mind, that there is a mosaic of information that is already out there. We have the 2010 language report. There was already recommendations made for that. We also have the administration recommendation, which historically the school committee accepts enrollment recommendations from the administration. And we also have the fiscal reality. We can't forget, I'm not sure, as a member sitting in the seats here, and also as a member of watching on TV, it's very hard to follow what exactly the paperwork is that you have in front of you. But in terms of the timeline, we do know that fiscally, it approached an issue last year in terms of consolidating English classrooms and moving children out of schools. That actually was a budget line item. So if you combine this in the mosaic theory, we understand we have fiscal, economic, social, and political concerns, and we would just urge many people that don't have an opportunity to sit through the meetings and rebut some kind of commentary that is not reflective of how we live in this town. So with that said, hopefully that the school committee could further deliberate and allow families to be onboarded into the K through 12 system that we have here. So that is more to the point. Let's put policies, controls, procedures in place that the administration is asking for. And I think that's really what's on the table. And to that end, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
All right, we had 2 items still on executive session.
We can move until next meeting.
The second item, Mr. Gillis, can that wait? It could. Okay. Ms. Kelly, you weren't at the beginning. We have I added one item, which was involving negotiations with the power company, which can be handled under executive session. If we had added to our agenda tonight, we had administrative contracts and this other item. But the administration says they can wait. We will hold them till next time. In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Ms. Kelly. That's unanimous, I hear.